It's hard for me to lean down to the mic, so I'm going to try to shout. My name is Thomas Reed. I'm Director of the Office of Communications Business Opportunities. Good morning and welcome. We're going to move along very, very quickly. We are happy to have you all here, and we are thrilled to have the Chairman Julius Janikowski is going to give some remarks, and following the Chairman, Commissioner Robert McDowell is going to speak to you as well. So again, welcome. We're looking forward to a pretty lively day talking about capital and capital resources and strategies. But first, I'd like our chairman to come and say a few words. And thank you for coming.
Thanks very much. Good morning, everyone. I don't have the same microphone challenges that Tom does. And I see I'm not the only one who didn't try to make this a 4-day weekend. And I was here at the Commission yesterday, and staff continues to work very hard every day. We have a lot to do. So thank you all for coming out this morning. Thank you, Tom, for organizing this, one in a series of events to try to connect capital with small businesses, entrepreneurs. We appreciate it very much, and for your leadership of our Office of Communications and Business Opportunities. Thank you, Commissioner McDowell, for joining us this morning. We appreciate it very much, and it shows the strong support of the Commission for measures to support entrepreneurship and diversity in our sector. I know that Tom has put together a great program today. I thank all of the panelists who've taken time to be here. We have terrific panelists, both from government. A number of our sister agencies have made time with us to be here today to share information about their programs and opportunities. And we have some terrific people from the private sector who are prepared to give real concrete advice on access to capital. I thank them all for coming. And with forgiveness, let me just spend a couple of minutes putting in context why we're doing this and why we're working on these issues more broadly and the opportunity that we see in the need. We are, of course, in the most challenging economic environment in memory, and everyone here is focused on spurring our economy and creating real opportunity. As we aggressively pursue policies to catalyze private investment and job creation, two facts stand out. First, our sector, the information, communications, and technology sector, represents about a sixth of our economy. Second, small and medium businesses have created more than 2/3 of net new jobs, more than 14 million jobs over the last decade and a half. What do these facts tell us? That the communications sector and small businesses in this sector can and must play a vital role in leading the country out of this economic downturn. In the past, about 650,000 new small businesses have been created on average on an annual basis. We need as a country to hit that level and exceed it again and again this year, next year, and the years beyond. And that won't happen unless a large percentage of new businesses, new small businesses, involve communications and information technologies. That's why this is so important to us at the FCC. It's why it's so important that the whole agency, driven by OCBO, pursue this kind of work. We want to do everything we can to help unleash the ingenuity and entrepreneurial spirit that makes this country so great, and that's so necessary to get our economy booming again. I see, as I do this job here in Washington, around the country, the kind of pent-up entrepreneurial spirit that's there. People who want to start new businesses, small businesses who want to grow, struggling with access to capital and struggling with the opportunities and the challenges of this new digital internet world. But the ingenuity, the entrepreneurship is certainly there. And in fact, it's the people who are here today, both in our panels and in the audience, and the kinds of people that we all see when we travel to communities around the country, who understand the importance and the opportunity of small businesses and new entrants to helping drive our economy forward. More and more we're seeing an embrace by entrepreneurs, smaller businesses, diverse businesses in the opportunities of broadband. The opportunities that it provides to reach new markets with your business, right? If you're an offline business, you don't just have to sell in your immediate area. You can reach markets across the country and across the world. And second, the opportunities of high-speed internet and the cloud to help small and new businesses lower their costs by moving some traditional services from higher cost offline experiences to lower cost cloud-based experiences. Another thing that we're seeing, and I hope this is a subject that gets discussed today, there's a tremendous amount of energy now in seed stage funding. This is related to the fact that the costs of starting new online or mobile platform businesses has come down. I remember a few years ago, if you were an entrepreneur, you had an idea and you wanted to start a new business in the internet space or on the mobile platform. You had to assume to get going that you'd need at least several $1 million. And so you had to get access to that kind of capital to get going. Obviously, for infrastructure-related businesses, the costs are much, much higher than that. As the technologies around the internet and mobile have matured a bit, the cost of starting new businesses has come way down. We're all starting to see the kinds of ultimately very large revenue-generating businesses that start with $150,000. And in fact, this is getting interesting enough to investors that the amount of money that's expected to go into seed stage and early stage funds over the next 48 months is an order of magnitude of $250 to $500 million. It's a big range because no one knows for sure, but these funds are being set up. But everyone who's involved in it will tell you that that range is much larger than what it had been earlier for the same thing. And if you assume that level of funding, and you assume $150,000 per initial investment, that tells you that if this happens, if we can continue to push this as a country, that's somewhere between 2,500 and 5,000 new companies being funded over the next few years. You know, if you think of that then as 10, 15, 20, 25 employees a country, you can see how much potential business creation, job creation comes out of these new platforms now that the costs are coming down to get going. Similarly, the costs now for an existing offline small business to expand online are coming down, and they're getting less complicated. So the opportunities are there. At the larger end, the kinds of communications that we see that require much larger investments of capital and infrastructure, those obviously have proportionate challenges in terms of access to the kind of capital that would allow new entrants, diverse entrants to play in those areas. A different set of challenges, hard challenges all the way, and I'm sure that we'll be hearing from our panelists today both concrete advice on how to get going, how to expand your business if you have one, and also options and strategies for playing at larger levels in more infrastructure-related businesses that require more capital. Everything that I'm describing to you has to do with why we spent so much time on the National Broadband Plan that we released a number of months ago. The first broadband plan that the U.S. has had, so important that we tackle broadband, high-speed internet as a major infrastructure challenge for the United States. For us to have the kind of economy we want to have in the 21st century, the kind of opportunity, we have to take this infrastructure seriously. And we have to move forward on the kinds of initiatives described in the plan, whether it's unleashing the opportunities of spectrum. We all see the mobile revolution hitting us every day with smartphones and tablets. Last night I saw for the first time the new Samsung Galaxy tablet bringing some competition into the tablet space, which is very exciting. I suspect almost everyone here has a smartphone, and the idea of connecting to the internet wirelessly from wherever you are, it's now the norm. We have real opportunities and challenges around spectrum, freeing up enough spectrum to meet the demands of these new technologies. I'm very pleased that we're making progress on this front, working together as a commission. We've released new spectrum in what we call here the WCS band, about 25 megahertz. We're on track to liberalize some of the rules around mobile satellite to allow more use for terrestrial broadband there. We had the first release of unlicensed spectrum in 25 years with the unanimous white spaces order that we did several weeks ago. All of this is about our economy. All of these are about small businesses because small businesses, new entrants need these platforms to be healthy and vibrant and accessible in order to succeed in the 21st century. Similarly, moving forward on our Universal Service Fund Reform Initiative, another very, very important item, also about creating platforms for small businesses to participate in our economy all over the country, not just where broadband is now, but where broadband isn't. Because if you're a small business anywhere in America and you want to be part of our digital economy, you need to have access to broadband. I didn't mean to go on all that long here. Let me mention a couple of initiatives that we're pursuing to help small businesses get access to the kinds of broad opportunities that I'm describing. So we're focused, obviously, at the FCC on these big, broad initiatives that improve our overall communications landscape as a platform for our economy and opportunity. We recognize that small businesses of all kinds have some unique challenges to participating in that. And so that's why the National Broadband Plan recommended, and we, thanks to Tom Reed, have been working very hard with the Small Business Administration to expand the advice and counseling that's available to small businesses who want to learn about broadband, become part of the digital future. Our work in this area found that small businesses face obstacles to adoption that are similar to what we see in ordinary consumers. It's a mixture of cost. In some cases, the price is too high, and we need to work on that, and lack of knowledge of the relevance of broadband and lack of digital skills. Not all small businesses know that they can save money and reach new markets if they go online. And we have a skills issue all over the country. And so we're working with the Small Business Administration on that. Tom has been very active in that, continuing to bring real energy to this area. Obviously, Tom has been working on a series of events like the one today to help educate and connect small businesses with capital. Today's workshop is part of a larger networking initiative to connect small businesses with larger communications companies to facilitate business opportunities. And I've asked Tom and Akbo to continue to set up the kinds of speed dating opportunities to connect capital and new entrants that Tom and Akbo have done successfully in the past, and that we will continue to do because they're making a difference. Finally, I have an announcement today. Very pleased to announce that we are rechartering our advisory committee on diversity in communications. The Diversity Committee has long been a valuable source of advice on how the FCC can expand opportunities for minorities and women in the telecommunications industry, focusing on issues like access to capital. The committee's charter was due to expire at the end of the year, and I'm glad to say that this important voice will continue to be heard at the Commission. So thank you all again for coming. I appreciate you being here. Thank you again to our panelists, to Tom Reed and all the other staff. Gilberto's working on this. I hope that today's event will be a successful part of our strategy to help get the economy moving in the right direction, and in particular to make sure that small businesses, the engine of our economy, have every chance to succeed in the new communications landscape. So with that, thank you very much, and I wish you a very successful day.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I introduce,
Please.
I'm very pleased to introduce my colleague, Commissioner McDowell, who, if you had the will, would love for you to say a few words to our audience. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm your colleague, not your colleague. Yes, that's true. I didn't bring my flea collar today, but good morning. Buenos dias. Gilberto has suggested that I also speak in Spanish. I'm going to spare you that torture today, especially if that might be your native language. I don't want to inadvertently insult you, although with the last name of De Jesus, you don't want to ignore the advice of someone with the last name of De Jesus. But in any case, thank you so much, and thank you, Tom, for putting this together. This is absolutely terrific, and Mr. Chairman, excellent remarks, and what makes my job easier right now is busy sort of crossing off things that you much more eloquently said than I could possibly say, and that I wholeheartedly agree with. I do want to compliment you and praise you for your appointment of Tom at ACPO. He has done just a fabulous job of re-energizing and really pushing things forward and producing a lot of positive and constructive work. And today is one of those things. So I'm proud to be able to once again speak to what is now becoming sort of an annual event here at the FCC. We've heard a lot of good reactions from last year's event, and I hope this year will be as useful, if not more so, than last year. As of Tuesday, I'd heard that registration for this event had been tracking well ahead of last year's, with more than 100 registered participants to come in person, with many others expected to join online. So to all of you online who are paying attention, welcome, and hopefully this will be productive for you as well. The numbers, as the chairman pointed out, the numbers show that there is no dearth of entrepreneurial spirit among America's business people, even in a challenging economy. And we as Americans tend to be very competitive. So I think soft economies actually can bring out the best in entrepreneurs, new ideas. This is when new ideas are planted and grow in perhaps the most fertile of soil, so that when the winds of economic change start going our way, they can really blossom into wonderfully productive entities that do a lot of good for American consumers, as well as create jobs and create higher incomes and better living conditions for our fellow Americans. So this cycle, I think, is no different. But there's still widespread agreement that access to capital is the biggest hurdle facing entrepreneurs, including minorities and women, and at times especially minorities and women who hope to enter and thrive in this new communications arena. Now, throughout my time as a commissioner, I've consistently called for greater awareness of the financial realities that face small enterprises and new entrants. And as you've heard from Chairman Janikowski, the Commission is considering a number of steps that it might take to promote diversity and encourage new entrants into all facets of the communications industry that we regulate, and even those beyond what we regulate. Things like rulemakings, however, can be very slow to progress. So I'm very pleased that we are continuing to provide some practical support for you right now in the form of information sharing and networking opportunities. I join the chairman also in thanking our government colleagues from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Department of Commerce, the Small Business Administration, and the U.S. Senate Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship for coming to the FCC to share their insights and advice as well. But it is particularly gratifying to see representatives from so many private investment entities to join us for the second panel, because it is the private sector, of course, that really drives investment and economic growth. It is the source of sustainable seed capital for all the good ideas that entrepreneurs hope to bring to the marketplace to benefit American consumers. The freedom to launch new ventures and the freedom to invest in good ideas are among the many freedoms that Americans sometimes take for granted. I've been reminded of that by this week's anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall on November 9th. November 9th marked the 21st anniversary of the fall of the wall, and that's when East Germans began to enjoy the political, social, and economic opportunities they had been denied for generations by an oppressive government. Of course, our country has its own history of denied opportunities for some of our citizens. And it is constructive to do what we can now to help forge business connections between people that may have been lacking in the past. This afternoon's breakout sessions should be particularly useful in that regard. I'm very grateful to all the panelists who have agreed to meet with the workshop participants in one-on-one discussions about the strengths and weaknesses of individual business plans. I hope and expect that today's workshop experience will expand the personal networks that are so critical to business success. And perhaps some of those personal networks that are forged today will help build physical networks for communications in the future. I also look forward to continuing the dialogue with the Minority Media and Telecommunications Council and many, many other issues, such as enforcement of the Commission's ban on the No Urban, No Hispanic dictates in advertising. Next month marks the 3rd anniversary of the Commission's historic 2007 diversity order. That order adopted 13 principles and rules in a historic fashion. That diversity order was actually the first time the federal government adopted a civil rights regulation in more than a generation. And I was very proud to help shape that and be part of that. It was a bright moment for the FCC. Of course, there's still more work to do, and I'm very well aware of that, and that's why we're here today. But also look forward to talking about other issues such as renewed advocacy before Congress for a legally sustainable tax certificate program that could help more minority and small business ownership of broadcast properties in particular. So anyway, I won't drone on beyond that. You want to hear from the participants and get to work so we can actually make some progress here. But once this event is over today, please don't hesitate to let me know what you're thinking about. How could we improve it in the future? What can we do? What are the new ideas that might come forth today? So please be in touch with me and my office. And otherwise, Tom, look forward to learning all that I can from the events today and going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner McDowell. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We really appreciate your support and your leadership on small business issues and on cap acquisition. Sort of without the work that you do and the collaboration that you both engage in, it wouldn't be possible for us to do our work. So thank you again, and thank you for taking the time to meet us here this morning. I know your schedules are horrible, so we really appreciate that you're able to join us today. I'll get started. We want to go through just a few housekeeping details. Let me first thank my illustrious panel here. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us again. I know it's very tough to squirrel away some time in your schedule to do this kind of work, and committing a full day is something special, so we really appreciate that. And for your ability to lend your expertise is even more appreciated. So thank you for that. We're going to have, as both the Commissioner and the Chairman alluded to, we're going to have 2 panel discussions today. This first is on really sort of an in-depth discussion around capital resources that are available through federal agencies. So my panelists here this morning are going to be speaking on that topic. But jumping ahead quickly, at 11 o'clock, we're going to have a second panel. Our private equity representatives are going to speak to you about what companies need to do in order to position themselves to get an investment company to make a financial bet on them. So very practical advice on that. So obviously, I hope that you stay for the full 2 sessions. We have breakout sessions that some 20+ companies registered for and submitted business plans for. So my staff has been incredibly busy coordinating all of those meetings. Just 3 seconds on that. Those meetings are going to be 30 minutes. You heard the chairman allude to them as speed dating. So 30 minutes really is a speedy process. For everyone that has meetings, those meetings are going to start at 1:30. All of those folks who are registered should meet back here at 1:30 after the lunch break, probably about 1:25. Someone on my staff, including me, will be escorting you to all of your locations. It's kind of Byzantine, kind of a maze in the agency, and there's some of the rooms that are located on above floor, so you have to get through security. So it's really important that you go with your escorts. If you get lost, come back here, and someone will pick you up and take you to your next meeting. So one side note, I think, is David Valdez here? David, I think you have a 9:30 meeting that Mr. Calvin Osborne is going to take you to. So with the Telecommunications Development Fund, so we're going to get started already. Let me, before I go further, let me thank my staff, particularly Calvin that you just saw, Karen Beverly, Gilberto de Jesus. They've been working tirelessly to put this together, so logistically it can be somewhat of a nightmare. But they've done an incredible job, and hopefully everything will go smoothly. And if it doesn't, definitely let us know. But with that, we're going to proceed to this panel. I'd like to introduce the gentleman here. Dr. Gary Boges is a senior level program policy advisor in the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Rural Utility Service. To his left is Mr. John Wade, he works as a financial analyst within the SBA's Office of Financial Assistance here in D.C. We also have Mr. David Gillers, who is counsel for lending and finance on the U.S. Senate Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship. And last is Mr. Carlos Guzman, who is National Business Development Specialist at the U.S. Department of Commerce, Minority Business Development Agency. So I'm going to have our panelists tell you about themselves, take a couple minutes to tell you who they are and tell you a little bit about their organizations, and then we're going to jump in. If you have questions, Gilberto and Calvin will be around. I think they're handing out index cards, so you can just jot down your questions. Please tell me your name so that I can, attribute the question, and then we'll just jump ahead. Doctor.
All right. Good morning, all. Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here and humbled in a bit because there's a great set of panelists here with me, and a great set of panelists from the entrepreneurial section or capital markets section that follows. It's exciting to be here and just explain to you a little bit about why the Department of Agriculture is in the business, or what business are you guys in, right? Originally, we were, I guess, a twinkle in Abraham Lincoln's eye that said this is the people's department. And it started out with agriculture, but in order for agriculture to be sustained, we needed economic development throughout the rural areas. And one of our key missions is that our rural cousins have the same opportunities as our urban cousins. So we make that link from the populous areas to those very rural areas, and we try to fund those very rural areas. In rural development, the department that I work in, first off, I report directly to Jonathan Adelstein. He was the former FCC commissioner, and he's now the administrator of the Rural Utility Service. In Rural Utility Service, we do electrification, we do water and waste systems, and we do telecommunications and broadband, and that's one of the reasons we're here today. We have a sister agency that does rural business services, and that's one that you should be very interested in as well, because they just don't do communications businesses. They do all kinds of businesses. We have another sister area that does two key important aspects. They provide housing in rural America, and they also provide community facilities in rural America. So sometimes just getting the community together to create a township or create an area where they could have economic prosperity as an origin is part of what that entity does. And together we could basically build a community from the ground up. And I could tell you a number of ways, but from the beginning we could put roads in that are community connect roads that will maybe bring you to a recycling center. We provide ambulances, fire trucks, and police cars. We provide the facilities for those police cars through our community facilities programs. We provide a number of different businesses, so ethanol type plants and that are specifically for rural or cooperative businesses where various companies get together and say we've got to take this to the next level, so we have all kinds of businesses. We provide the housing, we provide the telecommunications, the electrification, and the water and waste systems. So basically, a whole entity or a whole community can be built using the various programs that we have. And I'll go into our programs a little bit later, but just to introduce you that we are the handshake between what's happening in the urban community. So if you're here from an urban perspective, don't leave us out, because we might be able to help you make that handshake across the county to that rural community to help fund them so they could be connected up to your systems. Thank you.
John.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you, Gary. I'm John Wade. I'm with the U.S. Small Business Administration. As the name would imply, all 27 million small businesses are my customer. We are happy to be here to present to you information on the availability of all the services that the SBA makes available to small concerns throughout America. This is not a new event. We've actually been here since 1953. And our Small Business Investment Company program has been established since 1958. Those two pieces of legislation are the primary impetus behind all the activities that we pursue in trying to energize, to grow small businesses throughout America. There are basically four arms or pillars of the Small Business Administration that I'd want to make sure I introduce to you today. The one I'm most familiar with is our Office of Capital Access, and specifically the areas in our program devoted to the lending, the investing, and the surety bond development of small businesses throughout America. There's also a component that I think some of you are already familiar with through our SCORE partners, and that is our Offices of Entrepreneurial Development. As the chairman had mentioned earlier, I think one of the things that's very important for small businesses in the communication space is to recognize that there might be opportunities that you can see in front of you that you want to vet with others who might know whether it will work or not. And the way to do that is to utilize many of the services that are offered through our intermediaries in this Office of Entrepreneurial Development or Division of Entrepreneurial Development. And it goes the gamut from counseling all the way through to our SCORE representatives, which are the senior executives of, or senior core of retired executives. These are people who have been in the business before. In addition, as you would imagine, we are the hub for all federal government procurement that takes place in the federal government. We have a very large stake in implementing the procurement statutes for small businesses to ensure that they have a piece of the federal procurement pie. And then finally, a group in the Office of Advocacy. Oftentimes, the voice of small business needs to be heard. And when you have this office embedded within the Small Business Administration, it gives them an opportunity to know that they can be heard on the Hill, they can be heard in the administration. They have a need that needs to be met, and it won't be something that will be subjected to or subordinated by, well, you know, there's 27 million of you. There's no way I can answer all your questions. So those four elements are really what the SBA does offer to small businesses, and oftentimes I think we spend a lot of time trying to make sure you know we're there. There's a headquarters office here, but we are very nationwide. We're spread across 70 offices throughout all 50 states. Some of the states have actually more than one office. Those are our district offices, and of course we have a whole division of policymakers here in Washington that really provide a lot of the ideas generated from the market and from the legislation here to implement many of these activities. Now, I'd mentioned in this Office of Capital Access, with this being a acquisition and capital strategies symposium, what facets or what kind of depth do we have? Well, to give you an example, in our lending division, you might have all heard of the 7A and 504 programs, which are 7A, Section 7A of the Small Business Act. 504, ironically, is of the Small Business Investment Act. These two programs are the flagship lending programs, and it's important to understand both of these programs. In fact, many of our programs are offered through intermediaries. You would be meeting with banking institutions, thrifts, credit unions now, venture capital firms that are licensed by the SBA, surety bond companies that are licensed with the SBA. We also have an Office of International Trade and International Trade Finance. 97% of the exporting that's done in the United States is actually done by small businesses. And to that end, we have a need to reach out to that area of the community. Well, this lending group that I talk about, we currently have over $70 billion of small business loan guarantees outstanding. Combine that with the venture capital side, which has roughly $12 to $15 billion of outstanding indebtedness that we have on our books related to ventures groups that have placed money with small concerns. And you find that we are roughly $100 billion, in the ballpark of $100 billion of activity for small business. We are the primary driver for much of the small business activity when it has a federal stake involved. Are we only involved at the federal level? No, as I think some of my colleagues and panelists here will share with you, we reach out to some of the state initiatives also, because we know that this is going to be a public-private partnership that includes a partnership between the federal government and the related state governments. Okay? So to give you a flavor, this is where we are. Many of the activities we have been engaged in the last 2 years in particular have been driven by the fact that we have an obligation to you to make sure we are the impetus behind some of the economic development starting back up in this country. We have gone through something called the Recovery Act back in February of 2009. We have just recently, and I won't steal your thunder, David, we've just recently had the good fortune of having both houses of Congress and the President sign the Small Business Jobs Act. There are a number of initiatives that are associated with this that will perpetuate and further foster the capital access and the development of more market availability of capital to you, to our small business community. And it's my hope that as we go through the question and answer sessions today, as we go into the one-on-one sessions here, you get a better sense from us as to what the Small Business Administration is and what we can be for you. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, John. David.
Thank you. Good morning. I'll speak briefly, just give you a sense of what our organization is and my role in it. I work for the Senate Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship, and our chair is Senator Mary Landrieu from Louisiana, and our ranking member is Senator Olympia Snowe from Maine. And I'm on Senator Landrieu's staff, the majority staff. Our focus of the committee is twofold. Number one, we oversee my good friend John and his Small Business Administration. But number two, we are focused on any and every venue where small businesses are involved. So to take this recent Small Business Jobs Act as an example, there were significant parts of the bill that focused on SBA programs, lending programs, contracting, other programs, and there were other parts of the bill that focused on tax cuts and small business lending programs coming out of Treasury, and state small business lending programs also coming out of Treasury. Which is to say, our focus can be far and wide. Just one quick presentation, I think, of what really captures my job is my relationship with my Republican counterpart. And my role is counsel, and I focus on finance and lending, and my Republican counterpart does the same thing for Senator Snowe. And we always argue about who has a worse office. So my office has no right angles, and it has no daylight. In fact, it's a cubicle inside of a larger room that has no windows, which I think is pretty bad. I'll be sitting on the phone or on the computer and staring at no right angles. You start to feel vertigo after a couple hours. My counterpart always trumps me because his office is in a former bathroom. So, which is to say, Two things. Number one, it's political. It's a political environment. We are a legislative body, and we are focused intently on policy and on three main things: jobs, jobs, and jobs. That's all we care about. At the same time, it's a political process, and I work for a Democrat, and my counterpart works for a Republican. So things, even office space, are political. The other piece there is that we're also a small business. So there are probably 20 people on our committee staff trying to do lots of different things. And the departments and agencies really implement what Congress sets out, but the departments and agencies are essentially large corporations. So in a lot of respects, we're very similar to the small businesses who are here today. And I will wait to talk about more specific programs and details of the jobs bill when we circle back with questions.
So when people complain about their tax dollars, you just show them a picture of your cubicle. So.
That's right, and say, yes, you are paying my salary, but it's that.
Carlos.
First of all, let me start by saying thank you. Thank you to Thomas Reed, the director, and also to Calvin for all their support and for inviting MBDA to be here. We really appreciate this opportunity. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention that I have several of our clients that are here today. Jose Nino is here today. Beverly Kuykendall is here today. These are clients of MBDA, so if you want to know more about MBDA and what we do, it's probably better just talking to them, and they'll be more than happy to tell you what we do. But basically, when you look at MBDA, first of all, you should know that MBDA is probably the smallest agency in the federal government. Our total budget is about $30 million, which gets rounded off in most agencies. And we have about 100 employees, and we have about 46 centers throughout the United States. So given the limited resources, I think we do a tremendous job. And there are 27 million small businesses, as was mentioned, and there's 6 million minority-owned businesses. So when we look at it, how do we help minority businesses? Well, the three things that I think that we focus in on is, first, we advocate for minority businesses. That is that we meet with the movers and shakers, and we meet with other federal agencies such as FCC and NTIA, and we meet with them and SBA, of course, in terms of trying to see how we can create initiatives that would help minority businesses. But the real question is why? Why are we doing this? Well, if you look at the demographics, all the demographics is going to tell you that minority businesses are growing at a tremendous rate, that minorities themselves are growing at a tremendous rate, that in the next 50 years, 90% of the population growth in the United States will be minority. So it's critical and important that we invest in minority businesses today, because in the future, minorities are going to be the investors of the future, they're going to be the employees of the future, they're going to be the employers of the future. So it's very important that if America wants to be competitive in the future, we have to invest in minority business today. This is not a minority issue. It really is an issue, an American issue, in terms of to make sure that America is effective in the future. That's why we advocate for minority businesses. The second thing is that we've been struggling with is that we're trying to make our website, mbda.gov, into a portal for minority business, sort of like a one-stop shop, but also to be the go-to. If you want to learn about the demographics of minority-owned businesses, you come to our website. If you want to learn about services, you want to learn how you grow your business, your minority business, you come to our website. That's the direction that we want to go. And by the way, there's a business census that comes out every 5 years, and recently the data came out as of 2007, so it takes that long. In the past, we've been working with 2002 data, but now we're up to 2007 data. I encourage you to go to our website, again, mbda.gov, to look at that data and begin to see the impact that minority businesses are going to have now and in the future. The third thing that we focus in on is that we fund organizations that provide direct assistance to minority businesses. And in fact, I'm embarrassed to say that we just closed on 30 FFOs, 30 grants on Wednesday. We closed down. So it's tough to be announcing this when they already closed down. But it's important to know that we have a total of 46 centers that we fund, and we fund them from anywhere from $100,000 to $500,000 a year. And in this new FFO, it'll be for 5 years. So, and it's also important to note that we focus in on the metrics. And in other words, you really have to deliver the results. And the three metrics that we focus in on is jobs. Jobs is critical to what we do. And the second thing, obviously, is how many contracts did we help minority businesses get? And the third thing is how much financing did we help get for minority businesses? So that's our delivery system becomes obviously our website and also the 46 centers that we have. Now, each one of those centers that we have throughout the United States, the way they're selected is obviously based on, what opportunities are available in that particular territory or area, I should say, and what's the population of minority businesses in that particular area, and what's the percentage of minorities in general in that particular area. So you'll see that we'll have one in Los Angeles, in Miami, and in New York, all the big cities. But we also focus in on some of the others, like in New Orleans. We made a major commitment to try to help New Orleans and Detroit because of the high unemployment rate and the issues that are in these two particular areas. Okay, and the important thing is that each one of the centers that we have has around 3 business development specialists that focus on helping within their footprint. And then they report to regional directors, and we have 5 regional directors in 5 regions. We have the Chicago region, the New York region, the Atlanta region, the San Francisco region, and the Dallas region. And each one of those regions runs anywhere from 8 to 12 minority business development centers. And each one of those regional headquarters has 3 business development specialists that focus on that footprint. And at headquarters, we have 1 national business development specialist, and that's me. And so not to compete with our centers, I focus in on the larger deals and the larger transactions, and how do I connect them? How do I bring larger minority businesses, connect them to smaller emerging minority businesses, and have them team so they can go after bigger transactions? Those are the kinds of things that I do. That's what MBDA does, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you all. Before we get started, you mentioned Mr. Jose Nino, I think, in your remarks. He has a 10 o'clock meeting, so if he's here, Calvin Osborne will direct you to your 10 o'clock meeting. I think he's behind the pillar here.
See, our clients in action.
Also, and I'm George Kanuski. Is George Kanuski here? Okay. Well, let's jump in. I think it might be appropriate to start, David, with you. We can get the 30,000-foot view. John mentioned the Small Business Jobs Act that was signed into law in September. Could you tell us a little bit about the SBJA and give us some highlights and how is it? What's the thinking on the Hill as to how it's going to accomplish its job creation goals?
Sure. Thank you. On September 27th, the President signed into law H.R. 5297, the Small Business Jobs Act, which we were incredibly excited about. This was, in the Senator's mind and the committee's mind, a huge accomplishment for several reasons. It changed some SBA lending programs and other programs that over the years we had heard really need to be tweaked a little bit. And I'll go through the specifics. There's SBA programmatic piece, there's a tax piece, and there's a treasury piece. I won't talk in detail about the tax piece because I'm not a tax lawyer. I will go through about 5 highlights from the SBA lending side, and then I'll also speak about the treasury side. So first of all, the 7A and the 504 loan programs, which are the kind of workhorses of the SBA, which are excellent loan programs, we've raised the loan limits on those from $2 million to $5 million for the 7A loan program, and for the 504 from $1.5 million to $5.5 million. And this, we heard, was crucial both from industry and from the SBA to really increase penetration of the SBA loan programs and to increase participation. The second thing, which in my mind is actually a hidden gem of the SBA, and John and I were chatting about this before, the 504 loan program is for fixed assets, it's for commercial real estate. It allows long-term financing at fixed rates, which is unheard of in the private sector. And we have, according to some, a commercial real estate problem on our hands that will only get worse for the next 3 years. And folks are trying to figure out what to do about it. And folks over at the SBA came up with a suggestion not to fix the problem, but to try to minimize the crisis. And the issue is you have about $1.3 trillion of commercial real estate debt that over the next 3 years will need to be refinanced. But values of commercial real estate have dropped, so borrowers are not able to refinance anywhere. And so the question is, well, what to do about it? And under the 504 loan program, you were never allowed to refinance commercial real estate debt. But at the suggestion of the SBA and industry, you're now able to actually refinance commercial real estate debt, which hopefully will help avoid part of this crisis. There are recovery benefits that increase the loan guarantees of the 7A loan program from 75% to 90%, and also waived borrower fees that borrowers had to pay for SBA loans. Those are now waived through the end of the year. So if you're thinking about an SBA loan, do it now. We would encourage you to act soon. And John can speak to the programmatic details of it. And there are kind of other loan programs whose limits have gone up as well. One of the most exciting pieces of the bill is a $30 billion lending fund from the Treasury Department. And this is a public-private partnership between the Department of the Treasury and community banks across the country, the 7,000 or so community banks. And we had heard that a lot of community banks do not have enough capital. Their regulators will consider them healthy, but they just do not have enough capital to continue lending to small businesses. So there's a program that gets Treasury money out to a community bank, and if the community bank increases their small business lending portfolio, then the dividend rate at which the bank has to repay Treasury actually goes down, all the way down to 1%. So this is almost free money for banks who increase their small business lending. And finally, there's a state small business credit initiative. The question throughout has been, how do you get access to capital to small businesses? And this is something that is a real challenge, as you heard the chairman and the commissioner speak about. It's a real challenge. One suggestion was instead of starting a whole new federal program, take advantage of the already existing state programs that are out there. So Virginia has a wonderful capital access program, which essentially operates as a loan loss reserve program that banks can operate together with. Just get more money into this program and expand its usage. So there are about 22 states that have these programs, and the final part of the bill was allocating money to these programs that have a proven track record, and we're not creating a new federal program, we're just funding already successful programs.
John, do you have anything to add about we were talking about the 7A and 504 programs.
Yes. Thank you. One of the things we've had to do within the organization is figure out how fast we can get a lot of this to market. Some of it had already been put in place. Some of it was extensions of what we had already had in place previously. But the idea here was to take a program that really had been capped at $2 million and bring it up to $5 million. And how do you go about doing that? I think one of the things that we always struggle with that we'd like to do a better job of, and maybe this is the forum for it, is to really make you aware of the fact that there's no real distinction between the loan here that the bank makes to you that's a conventional loan and the loan that's an SBA loan. There really is no distinction here. The way they may have evaluated it might be different, all right? And the fact that it has a government guarantee has induced them to consider this loan, whereas they could not have done it under their conventional loan program. But the idea is that they are being given an opportunity in our loan programs to reach out and to extend themselves further than their conventional program will allow them to do. And what these two initiatives here and these two flagships really do is they drive home the idea that, look, there are a lot of small businesses that I know you cannot fund anymore in your conventional. We kind of call it the credit gap, and you'll see something called a credit box, that conventional lending units will shrink or expand depending upon the economic conditions of the time. Well, right now we're in a point where they're kind of shrinking that credit box, and some of that is because they do have regulators that are looking very closely at what they're doing. To that end, we also know that at the very end of the spectrum, as those small businesses that were right on the cusp, they were probably the most difficult to evaluate. And to those, when we see diminishing real estate returns, when we see diminishing prospects for new customer development, those also tend to move down the credit spectrum. So you have this widening gap here that's created by all these decisions that are made independent of the SBA. Well, that is our strike point. That is where the SBA programs come into light. whether it's for fixed rate financing or refinancing that has to come due in the next couple of years, that we can now offer with our lending partners through a 504 guarantee, a guarantee in which a first mortgage loan coupled with a 504 project financing is used to refinance an entire development with the idea that there is an eye toward expansion of this business that we want to take advantage of, that we want our lenders to take advantage of, that conventional lenders want to take advantage of, and this is the impetus behind it. There's the guarantee actually sits on the second piece of this part. The 7A side is just different. The 7A is, no, it won't be a project financing. We're going to take all $5 million and offer that up with a 90% guarantee. That puts the government in a position of taking on the responsibilities of ensuring that that particular lender, if that loan goes into default, will be able to recover upwards of 90% of the outstanding principal balance of that loan over the life of the loan, okay? And I think it's important for small businesses when they go and meet with institutions and they are in the process of negotiating with them about, well, here's my plan, here's where we're going with this, and you hear and I think you all know it, you hear the murmur of, we really don't do that, we really aren't interested in that. You know, most of my conventional loans are 3, 5, or 7 years at best, and you know, when you've got something that says you've got an 8-year, 7-month life on it, that's where you think most of your cash flow from whatever you're going to be doing is going to come from that. You want to have a program, and you want to have a lender that has a program that says if it's going to take 8 years and 7 months to cash flow, we have an SBA program that can do that. One of the real gems behind the program is that we don't have a specific hard and fast conforming 3-year, 5-year life to a specific loan. Those loans, when they're real estate based, can be up to 25 years. The working capital loan can be up to 7 years. Loans in between can be between 7 and 25 years, depending upon the nature of the underlying asset being financed here. But the idea here is we are looking at reasonable repayment of the debt, and it's based upon the cash flows or future cash flows of the business. Upwards of 35% of our portfolio is startups, okay? They are very difficult for conventional lenders to evaluate and to get through credit committees. That's why they're in our program. That's why that's why we're here. We want you to recognize that when you're sitting with that lending institution or you're trying to determine what lending institutions would make most amount of sense for me, ask them, do you have a small business lending unit? And it won't be a 504 unit or a 7A unit. SBA to them is SBA. They don't really, they want to kind of know where to direct the credit opportunity on the basis of what they're hearing from you. Not necessarily, you know, cubbyhole for 504, cubbyhole for 7A. So when you go through this exercise, like I say, be advised that that 7A program, that 504 program, and the increases that we've now received create opportunity for you. Opportunity in an environment right now, like I say, which is creating a gap, an increasing gap. And I don't know, I don't think anything's getting cheaper for me personally. And I would imagine it's not getting any less expensive for you. And so I think that this is where our strike point is. This is where our programs make the difference. Like I say, every one of these programs is offered through our intermediaries. There are some 5,000 lenders who are lender participants in our 7A program. We have another 300 certified development companies who work with lending institutions in that 504 project financing opportunities. We also have a micro lending unit. And one of the things that also is not spoken about is that there are credits that need to be made very early on in the life cycle. Hey, I might just have a great idea, but I haven't really developed it much further. It hasn't gotten to the point where it is successful on a production basis. But I'm going to need the help. I might not need $3 million or $4 million. I might only need $35,000. That's what this micro-lending program is for. We have specific institutions that are signed up with us to provide small microloans to microloan businesses of no more than $50,000 in loan size. And that $50,000 has just been increased in the Small Business Jobs Act. We had 35 before. We're now up to 50. And so we're trying to look at the life cycle of the businesses, both the very early startups and even the more advanced, later stage, the expansion capital opportunities, and say, where can we make a difference? Where can we make a difference? And that's just the lending side, okay? I'll defer now. Your colleagues in the next session will actually be much more expressive about the venture capital opportunities. But I think I'd like to talk about that maybe on a follow-up.
And if I could just follow up on that one final thing which you asked is, how do we evaluate how effective these programs are in our job creation hopes? And just the immediate answer is participation and take-up. And since September 27th, the numbers are now always changing, but there have been about $130 million of SBA loans that have been made literally in the past month and a half, which is very significant, in large part due to the fact that you don't have these fees at this point and the guarantees are increased. And I'm glad you mentioned that the microloan net is now increased as well to $50,000. So small tweaks and viewing real participation as to how effective the programs are.
Well, I want to give Gary and Carlos a chance to jump in, and then I'm going to jump to, I've got a number of questions from the audience, so thank you for sending those up. Gary, I know our U.S. has a wide array of grant and loan programs. Can you talk about, particularly in the area of telecommunications infrastructure build-out and that type of thing? If I'm a small company, what types of programs or grant programs should I be looking at? How do I qualify? That type of thing. And if there are success stories that you both can share in terms of programs that your agencies are offering, please do.
I like that question because there are some significant success stories in that area. We have a $1 billion funding requirement for this fiscal year. So we will be putting out $1 billion in telecommunications loans, telecommunications and broadband loans. Everything has to be broadband capable to qualify for the loan. Again, it has to be rural, so we start at the areas of the country that are 20,000 in populace or less. So it has a very focused clientele or a very focused point. We make these loans and have been making these loans since 1949. We've been doing it and creating jobs since 1949. And we have general field reps who are on the ground who can help you in the process. Now, we have some grant programs and some loan programs. One of the differences is the help that we can give you. In a grant program, it's usually competitive. There's a very small amount of money, so we have $17 million for grants to Community Connect programs, and that's when a community has no broadband at all. And what we will do is we will make a grant to get that initial pipe in, and a small business could come in and fund that, because we do fund small businesses, and they can put that initial pipe in, and part of the agreement with the grant is they're going to have to put up some service areas, like 10 or 20 computers, where the community could come in and start to play around on those broadband systems. In addition, they have to connect with that grant the major public services in the area so that they could get broadband service. And they agree to that up front. So that actually gets a new community that doesn't have it started. But it's very competitive. And in that, it's hard for us to help you because we don't want to have the conflict where you're competing with a lot of other companies that are competing. But if you're in an area where there's no other companies competing for that area, that's exactly the style we're looking for, and it's a great place to pick up a grant. On our loan programs, though, the key is that we have general field reps in every office, in every state, and those folks are there to help you put that loan package together. They know what our requirements are. They know it makes sense. They know it's been successful in the past, and they also want to make it available to their rural cousins and their rural constituencies. So we have this great amount of talent, and these are experts in the telecommunications business. They're experts in the finance business. That's all they do for a living is that world. Now, to partner up with our rural business programs, in the rural business program arena, we can fund any type of business, which includes telecommunications businesses, in 50,000 populace or less. So those are a little bit larger cities, right? And someone wants to put up 2 towers and run wireless for a particular small community or extend your facility to that small community. Where you are is not a rural requirement. It's the area that you serve is the rural requirement. So you could start, as I mentioned, that handshake. Hey, there's a couple little communities there, and I could get to those communities. Again, we've been doing this for a while. One of the other things that I think you should look into is we just put out $2 billion in Recovery Act funding, and that funding was just released this year, or I'm sorry, last fiscal year, so in 2010. And I think there's a lot of possibilities for small businesses to find out who got that funding and find out if you could make a partnership with them and ride on their coattails, because they have a mandate to get this job done as well. They've got to spend that money, and they're looking for talent. And you could be a subcontractor or put together a particular place that they might not be reaching, that they have already got the funding in place for.
Gary, you started talking about this a little bit, and this is a question from one of our audience members. And this is, how widespread is the outreach and engagement to increase awareness of RUS initiatives?
It's tremendous. We have 6,000 employees. In fact, invite me to any one of your meetings, and I'll try to get some travel money and go there. We do not tolerate discrimination, so if you hear of discrimination, you can call me personally, you can call Jonathan Adelstein personally, and you can call Mr. Vilsick personally, who are waiting and ready to mitigate any problems that you may be having.
Thank you. Carlos.
Yeah, I'd just like to add some success stories so that you can see it in our actions rather than me just say it. Basically, we're very proud of the fact that we're in the initial stages of working with Puerto Rico on the Caribbean grid, and it's going to be a huge project, and it's very much in the infancy stages, but their objective there is to try to connect Puerto Rico from an electrical grid standpoint to the British Virgin, to the U.S. Virgin Islands, then the British Virgin Islands, then go all the way down to Aruba, come down through Venezuela, then go through Panama, Honduras, Mexico, come back through Haiti and the Dominican Republic and create that Caribbean grid. The important thing in that is also, obviously, while you're laying down the grid, you could also lay down, fiber optics so that you can really improve broadband access in those particular areas. So we're very proud of that particular project that we're working on. In terms of a specific success story, we worked very closely with Maureen Lewis, which I think is going to be here this afternoon, and you're going to want to meet her. She focuses on outreach programs for NTIA and the broadband, and so that we were able to help bring in a minority business out of Alabama called Trillion, and they were able to win a $59 million grant in broadband as part of the NTIA, $5 billion grants that they were giving out that just ended recently. The other thing is that we were able to team up a large telecommunications company with a smaller minority business, in fact, the fastest growing Hispanic business in the United States, Microtech, to go after an IDIQ, and they were one of 46 that were awarded an IDIQ with a total value of about $30 billion. So those are the kinds of things that we're trying to do, and again, I'd like for the success stories to speak for us.
This question really it's from our audience. It's for John and for Carlos. What is the SBA doing that the MBDA is not doing, and vice versa? And then there's a second part to the question, but let's see if we can focus on that first.
Oftentimes, we have a responsibility to ensure that whatever programs we're operating don't have duplication with other agencies, whether it be with the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Commerce. Our outreach really extends to all types of small businesses. We recognize that there are specific sectors that are underserved. We have gone to great lengths to reach targeted communities. We recognize that there are specific units within other departments and other agencies, like Carlos's group, which are as well suited for this or more. And so what we try to do is take advantage of any type of synergy that we have in partnering his capital with our resources, not only on the capital side, but also on the entrepreneurial development side. I mean, there is an opportunity to put money before a small business concern, but they may need to know just how to deploy that, or better still, how do they know it will work? We have the entrepreneurial development units through our small business development centers, which are really a broad array of counselors throughout the United States, typically within many of the university educational institutions, that can provide the small business community with the hands-on kind of, does that make sense for me? If they have opportunities, like I say, in Puerto Rico to work on the grid, we have a small business development center there that can work with them when they say, gee, I'm going to be coming through a sweat. I know I'm going to get that money from MBDA, but I don't know how it's going to work because I've got payroll that's coming due in the next month and I might not get my funding in time. It's this idea of being able to take other elements of our programs, not just our capital programs, because we then reach into the next element on that grid, which is the procurement side. If there are federal procurement dollars that are going to be involved in any kind of infrastructure development, that if it's going to be devoted to small businesses and small business set-asides, it has to go through our procurement offices. It has to go through our side of the practice. And so it gives us an opportunity, again, to work with Carlos's group to demonstrate that there are some things that we will have, I don't call province over, and others that Carlos's group will have, and being able to say, when does it make sense for his group to step in as primary and us as secondary?
And I'd just like to add that, that we work very, very, very closely with SBA. There is a difference between us and SBA, but we work very, very closely. I don't know how many people here have heard of MedWeek, but MedWeek is the largest advocacy event that we have, and SBA is a strategic partner with us. When you look at specific projects or initiatives, for example, there's another project that we're working actually with new technology in Puerto Rico where we brought in SBA. SBA has some incredible programs. One program that nobody really talks about much is they have like 7 technology transfer SPDCs out there, and we work closely with one of them in Puerto Rico that's looking at new technology coming out of Puerto Rico, and especially in the area of ethanol, because Puerto Rico doesn't have any ethanol and doesn't blend their gasoline. So therefore, that's a particularly great initiative in terms of the energy sector that we work with SBA and with USDA. So we pride ourselves in that we are able to connect our clients with programs that SBA has and USDA has. And I will tell you that there should be no doubt in anybody's mind about the excellent programs that SBA has. And that's what we do, is we bring them to SBA, and we, at each one of our centers, coordinates directly with the district directors in SBA to make sure that those programs get out to minority businesses.
Okay. Gary, you might be able to speak to that as well in terms of the connective tissue that exists between USDA and SBA, and perhaps MBDA as well.
Yeah, we're certainly connected to our federal partners. We offer, we have a state office and a state director in all of the states. From that state office, we also have 400 other auxiliary offices, of course, all in rural America. And all of those folks are very fluent both in our programs and in what the SBA can do to help as well. So, you know, we partner with them and we know their programs, and we hope that they're doing the same thing with ours. In addition, we have other agriculture-related departments who also have a number of offices out there, and they are sending folks to our rural development offices. So you can go to our websites and look for rural development offices throughout the state. If you have a state in mind, you could start finding out through the state directors and who those general field reps are that I mentioned, and all of the offices that are close to you.
Now, the second part of this question, it reads, these conferences are big on rhetoric, yet come Monday morning, it's a different story. Are you looking at the receptivity your clients face? So I don't know, this is sort of anonymous. Does the term receptivity make sense? Or maybe we might have the individual who put this up explain what that means. Well, can you all speak to the question? Does it make, my sense of this is, are you looking at the level of success that individuals are facing as they seek loan products or grant products?
And this is something that I could just hop into. That's kind of squarely our job, or the job of the committee, the job of the Congress. is to get a sense from you whether things are working or not. And if things are not working, we have to know. And so it's kind of a two-sided relationship there. You actually have to tell us that things are not working, and or if folks are not being receptive to it. And that's actually why I say this, and it's actually true. I never turn down a meeting. We have that ability because, like I said, we're like a small business. Other folks on our committee also never say no to a meeting. And if there are issues that you have to discuss and that you think loan programs within the government are just not working effectively, then we need to know. And we're very receptive to whatever criticism and new directions or suggestions you would suggest. So you come to the committee, you have a very receptive audience, as I'm sure the departments and agencies also would. But that's to highlight that there is really kind of a give and take between what happens on the Hill, the departments and agencies, and let's say the trade groups, associations, and small businesses such as yourselves, who we really would love to hear from.
Can I add to that? Sure. Basically, when I mentioned earlier in terms of the metrics, one of the metrics that I failed to mention is return on investment. And the other side of receptivity, really, to me, is accountability. And we feel very, very strongly that having a high return on investment is very critical to us. So that we know that our return on investment is 100 to 1. We know that for every dollar that we invest in the minority business community, we get back in terms of $100 worth of results for that. So I think accountability is a key link to receptivity.
Tom, if I could add, the one thing that seems to also come up that kind of gets under the radar is the work that's done to retain jobs. Oftentimes, we're so focused on building the next big widget, the next big company, that a lot of times the financing that's being provided or the idea that's been tweaked a little bit is really to save the 50 or 100 jobs that are going to be gone as a result of the conditions of the current market with that particular product. And one of the things I think I like to use as a metric when we are trying to evaluate the efficacy of our programs, how many jobs are we saving? How many people are we actually keeping employed? Because I think that goes a long way toward taking that next step of saying, you gave me a chance, now I can succeed. Now I have the opportunity, and I've been able to carry 50 people with me. Now, it's hard for us to measure that, but we are vigilant in trying to ensure that not only are we trying to build the next Apple, the next Intel, the next Tom's toothpaste, okay, all of which came through the SBA before, but we're also interested in ensuring that the gentleman who has the paint company, okay, that's been able to broaden his market now and is able to do more than just a specific form of commercial paint work, now has an opportunity to keep the 100 people in the state of New York employed with his company because he's gotten the expansion financing he needed.
Yeah, I just want to add that Monday morning, my folks just got the mandate on October 1 to put out $1 billion, and they will do that. And their main goal is not just to make the loan or make the grant. Our goal is to make sure that our constituencies subscribe to those services. So we're going to do whatever it takes to empower you and empower your objectives in getting your business done to actually have the folks on the other end of the network signing on and linking on, and that's how we measure the number of subscribers that get out there.
All right. Excuse me. I've got another question. Anonymous. I'm getting on folks in the second panel. We want to make sure we know who's asking the questions, but I'm going to go ahead and proceed. This is an SBA question. Is there a program named 8M for minority women? If so, can you describe it?
Unfortunately, we're kind of siloed at SBA, so when we start talking about programs outside of our neighborhood, we kind of lose sight of the fact that there are other opportunities. I'm not familiar with an 8M program. I'd be more than happy to have that particular questionnaire, have my email address, because I will do all the due diligence I need to do to find out whether that's available to them.
Okay. I would also add that they contact Anna Harvey over at SBA. She runs the Women's Entrepreneurship Program, who has about 100 centers also that provide management technical assistance to them.
And I can also just put out the name Amy Sanchez of the Senate Small Business Committee works on minority and women-owned businesses, and she would also be very willing to be helpful.
This question is from Morris Freeman. We got somebody who identified. Thank you, Morris. What is the amount of money available for startups? I guess we can go program-wide. It's fairly general. What is the starting range? What does a startup do, or should we contact, or who should we contact in the government if you need more than $10 million? Can we speak to that? That's just for everybody on the panel.
In our programs, there's not a dollar limit that I know of. So, and 30% of what we put out for broadband has been to startups. So we have a proud statistic that folks are coming in and getting those things launched using our programs.
As I said before, roughly 35% of our portfolio in the 7A program is startups. We do have a dollar limit. That dollar limit's established by Congress at $5 million for both the 504 and 7A programs. And I would want to ensure that whatever needs below that radar that someone has, because many times, you might have a $3 or $4 million project, but you have a working capital component that you haven't even thought about that you might end up being house poor as a result of getting the $4 million loan. We want to make sure that that working capital component's met there also, and that's what the SBA is for.
And I'll just add on to that 504 piece. So even though there's a $5 or $5.5 million limit on the 504 loan program, that's only on the 40% guaranteed slice of the government. So really, you're talking about 12 million, somewhere between 12 and a $13 million financing on a fixed asset on a piece of real estate. So you could theoretically use 504 for a $12, $13 million acquisition or acquisition financing or a refinancing.
The question of the 10 million, I mean, that's going to be a great question for the next panel that's coming. I'm anxious to hear the answer to that question myself. But I think the important thing on financing is those of us who look at financing, it's important to manage the expectations of people. My experience has been that the most successful companies are the ones that start off, in terms of getting the monies from their friends and families and having the money available to them by having strategic partners and/or investors before they go to the bank. Those that go directly, they're starting up, they go directly to the bank are in for a rude awakening, given that banks tend to shy away from lending to startups, and there's good reasons for that. Banks want to get paid, and they're funny that way. They want to get paid back, and and what happens is that in the attempts to get paid back, they're going to look at your cash flow, and when they're looking at that cash flow, what they're looking at is what have you been doing for the last 3 years? And if you're a startup, your score drops dramatically because you don't have any startup numbers. And so they're also going to look at collateral. And if you're starting, it's very difficult to have that collateral. And if ever you have an issue of collateral, that's where the SBA, loan guarantee programs can come into play. But then the last issue is credit, and obviously people who are struggling, credit, and especially in these days, credit is a tough problem. So it's not easy to go directly to the banks. So you have to have a foundation, and that foundation is based on what you have available, what your friends can help you, or what people who want to invest in your company, or strategic partners like a supplier that might come in and provide you with some financing.
If I could just add, to have David here next to me makes it a lot easier for me to remember other elements of our program that probably speak to many of the growth elements you've got here. We've also got a small business investment company program. That program is designed around the idea that these are small concerns that have one thing in mind. They want to grow. They want to become something much greater than what they are now. Your venture panel coming up will know all about this stuff, but our investment company program is designed around the idea that we are here to serve that part of the market that won't get the attention of the very large multi-billion-dollar private equity firms, that there are some great ideas that are out here in the audience here that will be able to take advantage of these small business investment company initiatives. That there is a limit, but that limit is based upon the size of the capital that the SBIC itself has. So you could see $2, $3, $4, $5, $10 million deals done on the venture side, because it is those investment companies, much like you'll have in this next panel, who are looking at growth. They're looking to see you become something much larger than what you were yesterday. And so we have an investment company program that's designed around this. I locked into the loan program only because I've done this recently, but it's worth noting, and thank you, David, for bringing that to the front.
No, I'm glad you mentioned the SBIC program. Here's another question from the audience. The topic of international trade has come up in your comments. The question is, how can small and minority-owned businesses utilize broadband and wireless IT? And I think in particular, when dealing with or trying to transfer their skill set or their business to third world countries. And the end question is, can this type of effort be funded by the USDA or the SBA or MBDA? And if so, what are the requirements? I think I got that right. If someone put that question, I tried to clarify it.
To answer the last part first, from an MBDA standpoint, we only fund organizations that provide direct assistance. So none of the funding that we have go directly to small or minority businesses. So the funding is not there from our standpoint. However, we look at things, for example, Commerce has this great program called Commerce Connect that you're going to hear more and more about. And basically what we felt is that for too long, many federal agencies, they tend to be in silos, and we felt that it's better to connect some of these agencies in sort of like a one-stop shop, so that you're going to hear more and more about this concept of Commerce Connect, where you'll have NTIA linked up with ITA and MBDA and connecting them, so that when you go to them for management technical assistance or to go after any particular grants that they might have, you're connected to all of us at once.
The SBA actually partners with the Export-Import Bank, who is the primary lending arm for the international forum and the international lending opportunities available to small concerns. They have different size requirements that are much larger than ours would be, but we are also available at the smaller realm for international trade opportunities, either for working capital or long-term financing. If there's a specific foreign country purchase order requirement that needs to be financed, we are there to help out. We have offices throughout the United States which are jointly staffed by both the XM personnel and the SBA. And we know the components that make it attractive for XM on the one hand, or maybe I should say we cannot fund it, again, with that concept of avoiding duplicity, and then those that would really be strictly better suited for the SBA.
Agriculture is an exporter, and so we have significant experience with that. We have a foreign ag service within our department that will help in that arena. But our concept is that if we bring the broadband talent or the broadband tool, the infrastructure to rural America, those rural Americans could sign on with their organizations and then start marketing their services internationally, and that's a lot of companies have done that very successfully.
I just wanted to add that when you talk about international trade, it's always important to remember that when you lead the United States, especially in those emerging countries, they all tend to be minorities. And the one thing that we know is that minorities in the United States are in the best position, if you can team up with them, to get involved in exporting to the other countries, because of the natural affinities of Asian Americans dealing with Asian countries, Hispanics dealing with the Hispanic countries, African Americans dealing with Africa. So it becomes a natural affinity, and we think that that's a good success formula.
If I could just mention one thing. I should preface this by saying my involvement in the telecom and broadband sector is limited literally to 12 years ago. During a summer internship of mine, I wrote a report on DSL versus cable access. So I cannot speak in great detail to broadband, but I think this is a good opportunity just to mention that the percentage of small businesses who actually export is only at about somewhere between 3 and 4%. And a large part of this has to do just with knowledge of foreign markets, but also number two, again, financing. And the SBA does have a program for export and trade that, again, is guaranteed at 90%. So there's great incentive for a bank to get involved, and our understanding is that small businesses often just do not know of export and trade programs that are available to them. So I would encourage those who are thinking about it to seriously consider these programs.
I've got time for about one more question. We've only got a few more minutes, and I've got sort of a couple closeouts. This question is from Broderick Byers. It's about internet advertising and marketing solutions. And his question is are the agencies assisting and funding service companies, which I'm sure they are, versus, we've talked a little bit about infrastructure deployment and development, but let's talk about the other side of that, either on the adoption side in terms of internet or broadband, or just different kinds of service companies. What kinds of programs are available for small business service companies?
Yes, we do make lending available, make investing available to service companies. I think one of the things that distinguishes the SBA from the conventional programs is that we are not driven on this precept of having sufficient collateral to support your business. But we do recognize that when you're looking at a service firm, you're basically looking at something that, while may not necessarily be fungible, is something that can be replicated by somebody else. There's got to be some means for the repayment and the justification for the repayment to take place. I think one of the concepts, the things I just wrote down here, is proof of concept. I've heard this term a lot, especially in the emerging industries, because it's important for people to have developed a proof of concept and a business plan that can attract the interest of the respective lending institution, recognizing that you may not have the hardware or the real assets that we'd be looking for normally for a conventional financing unit, but you're talking about a particular plan which might have a sufficient length in repayment, which allows me to spread those repayments of that loan over a longer period of time. And as long as I understand that I can get a reasonable return or cash flow return on both my debt and the debt of everybody else to make you more successful, then I'm willing to consider it. It's very, very difficult for us to not shy away from the fact that, you know, service enterprises are primarily, it's human knowledge, it's human capital, and you've got to make the claim, what makes my human capital that much more attractive, enough so that I could get the funding from you.
As I think about service companies, our rural business programs, like I said, for communities that are 50,000 or less, we will finance service companies. So we financed healthcare service companies where they provide home service and home healthcare type services. I'm sure we financed a number of call centers and service entities like that. I mean, the service spectrum is quite wide, and we've got a great portfolio of service entities in rural America.
Well, to close out, I've got a two-part question. One is really, as you advise a lot of the entrepreneurs who are here in terms of their initial capital needs, what are sort of the, just summing up, what's the core advice that you would offer individuals who are trying to get their initial seed capital, and who are startups? What strategies should they employ? And the second part of that is, obviously, we only have a short period of time here, but what resources are out there that are available for them to look at to sort of educate themselves a little bit beyond this type of a workshop about capital acquisition? And we can just go across the panel. Gary.
Again, as I mentioned, we've got 50 state offices, 400 or so local offices. We have experts in telecommunications, so that's their only job, is to make sure your plan is technically sound and provides, and the best advice is the financial feasibility to actually execute the business plan.
Tom, if I can, with regards to what strategies should we employ, I think one of the things I've always asked of others when I've talked to them about where they're going and what direction they have is, what is their next step? What is the end game here? Where do they go in phase 2? Because oftentimes your venture community, as I recall, your venture community is always asking the question, when do I get out? Okay, I think that the entrepreneur has this great product, has this great concept, but they need to go the next step and say, where do I want to go with this if I am successful? What's my next phase? Because I've got to be able to address the fact that if it's a startup, I'm going to be here for a while. I'm going to need more than one round of financing. Okay, I'm going to need to be in a position where someday I could have sufficient earnings power to generate the repayment of that loan. Okay, I think it's important for the entrepreneur to look from the other side of the table and say, what can I expect from you today and maybe tomorrow?
And following up on what John has said, and just to reiterate, there are some wonderful, although temporary, benefits that were just passed in our jobs bill. So I would encourage those thinking about a 7A or a 504 loan to do it within the next few months. I should also point out that the 504 refi program, so if in fact there are owner-occupied commercial real estate owners here, that's only a temporary program. It's only for the next 2 years. And so we'd encourage folks to take advantage of it in that time frame. As far as resources, use the departments and agencies, all of these branch offices that are out there that are in your home states. You've got the SBA regional offices. You also have the small business development centers that are often housed at universities, and they are kind of great sounding boards to run ideas off of, and to actually target it precisely which government loan program would be appropriate for you. The final thing is that I'd mentioned that Congress and the Hill really, it's a political and legislative entity. Our committee really is as bipartisan as they come. So Senator Landrieu is a fairly conservative Democrat. Senator Snowe is a moderate Republican, and there are even folks on our staffs who are kind of either identical or folks on Landrieu's staff who are more conservative than folks on Snow's staff, which is to say we try to do things as bipartisanly as possible. And if you have an idea, we're always looking for new ideas. If you have an idea for a way to tweak a government program that you find is not working completely efficiently and as effectively as you think it should, or if you have an idea for a new program, right? If we think that the SBIC program does not sufficiently get to that kind of gap of funding between 10 million and 30 million or 100 million where the large VCs come in, maybe we should start one. Or we should start some kind of government encouraged involvement in that sector. We'd be very open to whatever ideas and suggestions you have.
Yeah. What I would say is from an MBDA perspective is visit our website, mbda.gov, because there's where you're going to see that we actually have opportunities that we're listing there. We also have the demographics that I keep talking about. Also, there's where our centers, you can find out where our centers are and what's the nearest center that you can go and get some help in terms of your business. There you will also see success stories. One key success story that I want to mention is our Chicago regional director, Mr. Eric Dobine, was recognized for leading the creation of the Minority Investment Management Forum, which has resulted in over $1 billion worth of transactions. That's the kind of success stories that we like to put on our website. So I encourage you to go to our website. The last thing I want to talk about is if you really want to grow your business, there's an excellent book out there called, and I see Beverly shaking her head because I recommend this to all my clients, is a book called Blueprint to $1 Billion, and how to go from 0 to $1 billion, how to bring that company. It's written by a gentleman by the name of David Thompson, and he wrote the book as an investment vehicle, but I saw it as probably one of the best business development tools that you can have. And people will look at it and say, well, $1 billion, that's too big. I said, well, the reality is that to get to a billion, you got to go past 100 million. To get to 100 million, you got to go past 50 million. So therefore, to me, the formula is the same. It's an excellent book that I highly recommend.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, Carlos, David, John, Gary. Thank you so much for agreeing to share your expertise and your time. I mean, let's please give our panelists a hand. I'd like to thank everybody for their attention. Thank you for your questions. I apologize I wasn't able to get to all of them, but please do in the second session keep them coming. And I think many of you are going to have meetings with Carlos, John, and Gary. I mean, if you have pressing political questions, you can talk to David, but those breakouts, I don't think you can keep those into 30 minutes. So we're going to take a quick break for about 10 minutes. We're going to reconvene here at 11 with our private sector panel. So I'll see you back here in 10. Thank you. Are we ready to get started? All right. Good morning again, everybody. We are ready to proceed with our second panel. We've got a great group this afternoon. We've got Anita Stevens-Graham to my immediate left, who is with Opportunity Capital Partners, principal partner. Yeah, principal partner. We'll have to. I know there's okay. All right, and Mr. Robert Green, who's with CENTCOM, and to his left is Jerry Johnson from RLJ Equity, Mr. David Grain, who's the founder and CEO of Grain Communications Group, and to my very, very far left is Mr. James Pastoriza, who is with the Telecommunications Development Fund. So we're going to jump right in, just as we did in the morning. I think give each of our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves, talk about their fund, their investment strategy, and their outlook, and to tell you a little bit about their role with their company, starting with Anita. And thank you all, by the way, for coming and sharing your expertise with us.
Well, good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Anita Stevens-Graham, and I'm a partner with Opportunity Capital Partners. Opportunity Capital is a fund that was founded back in 1971 by Peter Thompson, and at the time the focus of the fund was really to provide equity capital and equity-like capital to women and minority-owned business. Over time, as it evolved, you know, it took advantage of opportunities where, quite frankly, minority businesses were growing. And in one area where we excelled was in communications, because as a result of the tax certificate that was created, that was sort of the birth of a lot of the minority entrepreneurs in the broadcast industry. And so Opportunity Capital, along with CENTCOM and some of the other funds, were the pioneers in really funding some of the early players in the marketplace. And that's really where we cut our teeth in investing in communications. We have since, in our subsequent funds, continued to have a significant amount of our portfolio in communications. Today, we invest out of Opportunity Capital Partners 4. We manage $135 million of capital under management. We have invested and still have in our portfolio several traditional broadcast companies. We're investors in TV One. We're investors in Bustos Media. So we still have investments in those properties. I will tell you that we've been in a restructuring mode to make sure these are quality companies with good cash flow, but quite frankly, with the valuation adjustments, we have had to go back and work with the senior lenders. We've been successful so far in the restructuring of those companies, but that has been the mode of the traditional broadcast companies. We did migrate away from traditional broadcasting and began to invest in wireless. We have investments in tower companies. We started to focus on content companies that were really addressing niche markets. So we have a company that focuses on providing content to the Asian community, and we have one that focuses on providing content to the Hispanic community. So we've kind of moved away from traditional broadcasting because of just the way the valuations were and the market was, and moved into the more content-oriented type opportunities, which is quite different when you are traditionally used to the downside protection that an FCC license historically had provided, and kind of moving into this new era where you are dealing more in content rather than actual physical assets. But we invest anywhere from $2 million to $10 million of capital. And, we look for the traditional things, which is strong management team. We are later stage investors, growth capital investors, so we're not in the early stages. So we do want to see revenue and we do want to see cash flow, but we are continuing to be investors in the space.
Thank you, Anita. Bob.
First of all, I want to thank Tom for having me here today. It's an honor for us to be here and participate in the program. The neat thing for me going after Anita is that I get to agree with almost everything that Anita said, because our firms have been investing together for.
Are we ready to get started? All right. Good morning again, everybody. We are ready to proceed with our second panel. We've got a great group this afternoon. We've got Anita Stevens-Graham to my immediate left, who is with Opportunity Capital Partners, a principal partner. Yeah, principal partner. We'll have to. I know there's okay. All right. And Mr. Robert Green, who's with CENTCOM, and to his left is Jerry Johnson from RLJ Equity, Mr. David Grain, who's the founder and CEO of Grain Communications Group, and to my very, very far left is Mr. James Pastoriza, who is with the Telecommunications Development Fund. So we're going to jump right in, just as we did in the morning. I think give each of our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves, talk about their fund, their investment strategy, and their outlook, and to tell you a little bit about their role with their company, starting with Anita. And thank you all, by the way, for coming and sharing your expertise with us.
Well, good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Anita Stevens-Graham, and I'm a partner with Opportunity Capital Partners. Opportunity Capital is a fund that was founded back in 1971 by Peter Thompson, and at the time the focus of the fund was really to provide equity capital and equity-like capital to women and minority-owned business. Over time, as it evolved, you know, it took advantage of opportunities where, quite frankly, minority businesses were growing. And in one area where we excelled was in communications, because as a result of the tax certificate that was created, that was sort of the birth of a lot of the minority entrepreneurs in the broadcast industry. And so Opportunity Capital, along with CENTCOM and some of the other funds, were the pioneers in really funding some of the early players in the marketplace. And that's where we cut our teeth in investing in communications. We have since, in our subsequent funds, continued to have a significant amount of our portfolio in communications. Today, we invest out of Opportunity Capital Partners 4. We manage $135 million of capital under management. We have invested and still have in our portfolio several traditional broadcast companies. We're investors in TV One. We're investors in Bustos Media. So we still have investments in those properties. I will tell you that we've been in a restructuring mode to make sure these are quality companies with good cash flow, but quite frankly, with the valuation adjustments, we have had to go back and work with the senior lenders. We've been successful so far in the restructuring of those companies, but that has been the mode of the traditional broadcast companies. We did migrate away from traditional broadcasting and began to invest in wireless. We have investments in tower companies. We started to focus on content companies that were really addressing niche markets. So we have a company that focuses on providing content to the Asian community, and we have one that focuses on providing content to the Hispanic community. So we've kind of moved away from traditional broadcasting because of just the way the valuations were on the market was, and moved into the more content-oriented type opportunities, which is quite different when you are traditionally used to the downside protection that an FCC license historically had provided, and kind of moving into this new era where you are dealing more in content rather than actual physical assets. But we invest anywhere from $2 million to $10 million of capital. And, we look for the traditional things, which is strong management team. We are later stage investors, growth capital investors, so we're not in the early stages. So we do want to see revenue and we do want to see cash flow, but we are continuing to be investors in the space.
Thank you, Anita. Bob.
First of all, I want to thank Tom for having me here today. It's an honor for us to be here and participate in the program. The neat thing for me going after Anita is that I get to agree with almost everything that Anita said, because our firms have been investing together for over 32 years. So similar strategy. About the only thing that I would add is the personals on CENTCOM. CENTCOM is currently investing out of our 5th venture capital fund. We're a bit different from Opportunity Capital in the sense that we invest what we describe as multi-stage, but that multi-stage usually starts with early stage investments. So we'll start with a cocktail napkin or a conversation and then work to build a business plan that will fund. We still want exciting companies with tremendous opportunity. We have to produce a venture return. So what does that look like? We're typically looking to exit at 3 times our money. So whatever we put in over a 4 to 6 year period, we'd like to come out with 3 times our money, if not better. But we consider ourselves a very entrepreneurial-centric firm in the sense that we're not a buyout or a control investor. We want to partner with the entrepreneur. In every case where we've been successful, it's been because of an entrepreneur. So we don't isolate that skill set, and we also don't want to alienate it. So we partner with entrepreneurs to help build companies that ultimately we can exit successfully and the entrepreneur can exit successfully. Over our history, we have invested with some very notable brand names. We were some of the early capital in BET and its original founding with Bob Johnson. We were early capital in Radio 1 with Kathy Hughes, and ultimately stayed in that deal about 20 years until the company was IPO'd. It's difficult to do that today because the pressures of investing out of an institutional venture capital fund, we've got 10 years. So the first 5 years, we're in an active investment period, and then whatever remaining time, whether that's 7 years, depending upon when the deal was done, or 10 years, we're attempting to get out of the deal. Our current fund is $275 million. We're about 65% invested out of that fund. And with the exception of gaming, I think we pretty much have invested in all the sectors that Opportunity Capital has invested in. But we really like the entertainment game space, not the Las Vegas, Atlantic City gaming model, but clearly the console game and the online internet game space are really is one area that we've done 2 deals in recently. The properties look great because there's a lot of interest there. There are double-digit growth opportunities there. And we look forward to continuing to invest in that space. So thank you for having me, Tom, and I look forward to participating.
Thank you, Bob.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to echo both Bob and Anita in thanking Tom for really putting this together. Thank you for making this happen. I think it's very important for folks on the principal side to meet entrepreneurs like yourself with a lot of the new ideas that really, quite frankly, will ultimately help supercharge the economy, 5 to 10 years out. My name is Jerry Johnson with RLJ Equity Partners. We're a $230 million private equity firm. I had the opportunity to invest both with Bob and Anita's firms in the past on the media side, both in media, telecom, and business services. However, our firm has a little bit of a different focus in that we focus on cash flow oriented companies. So we like companies that have at least $5 to $10 million of free cash flow as you look at over the past 4 to 5 year period. Our focus primarily is business services, government services, including aerospace and defense. And I think the relevant opportunities that you'll be presenting would be anything from telecom infrastructure that would be cash flowing, or any business services that involve technology that's provided to Fortune 500 companies or governments. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks also, Tom, for having us here. Appreciate it. David Grain, run Grain Communications Group. We are a private equity fund. This is our second fund. We raised $26 million in our first fund. Second fund, which is closing, has had one closing and has a final closing coming up in the next few weeks, is $150 million. We invest in the wireless value chain. So we own a large portfolio of cell phone towers, which is one of my earlier backgrounds. We also invest in the backhaul space, as well as spectrum. We're a cash flow investor. Size, has been a very broad range, less than $1 million, as much as $20 million. And our focus is really long duration cash flows that are contractual. Ideally, we like escalators on the annual cash flows. Typically, those cash flows need to be tied to either hard assets or financeable assets like spectrum, and non-correlated to public securities. That's sort of our focus. At the same time, we still take a look at more interesting non-asset-based investments that are more venture in orientation, but solely in the wireless space, and that's really our focus.
Jim Pastoriza, I'm clearly the outlier in this group because I'm the only one who's not smart enough to invest in cash flow businesses. I invest in the very earliest stages of a company's life in seed investing. And so let me talk to you about that. Let me give you a little context. I came up through the engineering and operations side of AT&T, so it's sort of my background in operating in nature. I've been in the venture business for the last 15 plus years. We started a venture fund at AT&T, and I was out in Silicon Valley for a long time with JP Morgan, and then came back to take over TDF, which I run today here in Washington, D.C. TDF is an $80 million fund, so small. We're telecom-centric, for better or for worse, and so we have at our core sort of a mix of infrastructure, services, and equipment companies. I would say that over the life of the fund, we've really migrated to be an early-stage investor. I would say of our 15 deals, at least half are sort of Series A, pre-revenue, 3 people and a dog kind of stuff. And we like that for a couple of reasons. One, it makes sense for the size fund that we are. It's hard for us to do later stage investing and have a meaningful ownership percentage in that. So we really like that. Second, just sort of fits our personality. I think we're a group who really likes the process of creating something out of nothing with other like-minded individuals. And then third, it gives us a little control over our destiny. We have more of a hand, if you will, in shaping how the company moves over time. So we're very telecom-centric. I would say over the last couple of years, we've tried to branch out a little bit into leveraging telecom, but to get into the intersection with healthcare and the intersection with energy efficiency. So we've done some investing that's branched out from that core. And I would say investment size is anywhere from $500,000 up to a couple million.
Well, thank you all. Good morning. First, I'd like to say, again, I really want to express my thanks to all of you for agreeing to assist with this panel. All of you have tremendous demands on your time and your energy, so it really is greatly appreciated that you would take the time out. This group in particular, I think in setting this up, each and every one of them was more than willing to volunteer their time, which is in such short supply. So I just want to say again how much I appreciate you all coming down. Again, I invite everybody to ask questions. Please tell me, put your name on the question. And if your question is directed at one of our panelists, please indicate that as well. My eyes aren't too good, so try to write big. And then we'll just proceed from there. So fire them up when you're ready. Let's jump in. The first question is for everybody on the panel, really, and that is, let's talk generally about the current economic climate. I mean, we are in a recovery, a slow recovery. How, if at all, has our current economic situation impacted your investment strategy? Has it changed? Are there different things that you do now that you say didn't do before we sort of hit this period? So,
well, I'll start. Can you guys hear me? I'll start. As I mentioned earlier, with the recent downturn, and even prior to that, the communications, particularly traditional broadcasting companies, valuations were really dropping. And as a result, that really put pressure on many of the companies that had quite a bit of leverage on those businesses. And so the senior lenders in many cases were finding themselves upside down in those transactions. Ironically, in many cases, the operations of the business was fine. I mean, the companies were cash flowing. They may have had flat growth, but there was still cash flow. But the valuations were such that now the banks were showing they were carrying at a loss. And so we went into a restructuring mode in a lot of instances. What that has done, especially for our firm, is to slow down the number of deals that we're doing right now until all of those workouts are complete, those restructurings are completed. What we're also seeing that has affected the strategy is that on the lower end of the market, which is where we play, the middle and lower middle market, you're not seeing as much lending activity. And when you do see it, the lenders are requiring what I call additional equity. It's almost like an over-equitizing of the transaction. And so when you start having to look at putting in more equity against a transaction, you don't have the same kind of leverage. You don't even want the same kind of leverage, to tell you the truth. It does begin to affect the kind of deals that you look at in terms of generating the kind of returns that we're after. So in effect, our portfolio, we've slowed down on traditional broadcasting until, we think that the market is going to come back. And we do think the market is going to come back. And as these deals are, in fact, restructured and the underlying cash flow is in place, those companies will be strong. And we are seeing good indicators in traditional radio and TV. That's the first thing. On the wireless side, the more non-asset side, we've been creeping into that area. It's a little different for us, but it is becoming a bigger part of our portfolio. It takes on a different kind of restructuring because you don't have the traditional downside protection, but we are looking at more deals in that area. Tower companies we love because that's still one of the few areas in communications where multiples are holding their own, and we like to play in that area as well. So that's how the portfolio has shifted as a result of the downturn.
And so for us, we really do three things. The first thing we do is we have to raise the money to be able to invest it. And fortunately for us, we closed our fund in October of 2007. And I say fortunately because anybody that was out raising a fund after that saw two things happen. They saw the commitment size shrink, and they saw the time frame to close the money expanded infinitely. So if they even were able to close it, it took a lot longer to close it. So on the fundraising side, or at least the raising money side, we were pretty well protected and not exposed to the downturn. The middle part of what we do, which is the piece you all are most interested in, is the actual investments themselves. Our strategy, given that it's multi-stage and it starts with early stage Series A, I'll use an analogy. If you work in the water, you really don't care if it's raining. Our companies, the companies that we fund, the business plans that we see have parentheses around the numbers at the bottom of the cash flow columns for the first couple of years. So they're losing money for the non-accountants, non-operators in the room. Our companies are going to lose money for the first year, second year. Hopefully by the end of the second year, beginning of the third year, they turn cash flow positive. So our belief was that if the recession was not going to be the longest recession in the history since the Great Depression, which it actually was, that it didn't matter if it was raining or not because we were already wet in the water. The one thing we were watching out for, to keep the analogy going, is lightning. We didn't want to see anything radically negative happening that might charge the water, so to speak. So, we ended up we deployed in 2008, we deployed $50 million. In 2009, we deployed $65 million. And then this year in 2010, we didn't do any new deals. We simply reinvested in the companies that were in our portfolio. The one thing that we saw, though, and it's to Anita's point, those first 2 years' worth of losses became the first 3 years' worth of losses. And so we're in that right now where, we talk a lot in finance about the J-curve, the period of time that you lose money until you start to make money. Well, we thought we were to the left of the J-curve and about to come out of it, and it's becoming it's going to be a capital J. So it's taking a little bit longer for us to get through. The last thing that we do is we attempt to sell our companies to liquidate and return capital to our LPs. We did have one liquidation in 2009, which was a very large one that we had planned for a while, which was the sale of Iridium. We were able to sell the Iridium satellite network to a special purpose acquisition corp and created a fair amount of liquidity around that. So with that, though, we had to take a haircut because, as Anita talked about, the valuations going in the deals, valuations coming out of the deals hit you on the other side. So the valuation that we thought we had for Iridium, or the deal that we struck 2 months later, before we could close the deal, it came back as a 20% haircut. So you have to decide if you want to get out, you want to hold the asset. You'll hear, some of the other folks on the panel talk about the lack of folks that were looking to sell companies in that time period. We actually needed to get out of Iridium, and we did. So across our three business activities, I would say one was significantly impacted, one not impacted, and one sort of impacted, if that's a good enough answer.
Yeah, as you all know, we're in the midst of coming out of one of the greatest, as Bob was saying, sort of recession since the Great Depression, but I think in the midst of this recession, there are growth markets, and what we've been doing is focusing on growth areas within the business services space and also growth markets from an international perspective. So last year, we actually did the largest buyout in Brazil. It was on the consumer side. It's a tour operator. But because the Brazilian market is growing so much, we're able to increase EBITDA in about 9 months by 100%. In the U.S. market, I would say the 3 areas that we're focused on that really pertain to this group would be cybersecurity / business services. We think that's a very much a growth market, and we like to play in markets that we think we have some type of an edge in. And I think naturally by being in the Washington, D.C. area and having some relationships in government, you know, cyber is a key industry to focus on, because if you can crack the code in government, you can also sell that into the commercial sector. Another area that we're looking at is healthcare IT, particularly healthcare IT services, and really growth markets within healthcare IT. Again, that's another one where many times you start out selling to the government. You have, you know, large agencies like VA, HHS that are looking to completely revamp some of their internal technologies. And the third area would be around the grid, energy services, and smart grid technologies. Again, there are areas there that are also cash flowing companies in a growth environment. So if you look at most of the growth that's projected over the next 5 years from a GDP perspective, looking at the global GDP, about 95% of that growth is coming from BRIC countries, Brazil, India, China, and Russia. If you look within the domestic growth areas, most of that's taking place within technology in those areas of cybersecurity, healthcare IT, and smart grid technologies. So that's where our focus is on the growth side.
So we're a little bit different in the sense that, as opposed to just a traditional straight investor, we not only invest, but we also operate. So the things in this current economy and economic environment that affect us are financing. You know, the more traditional ways of financing hard assets can include securitizations. The securitization market is more or less gone. And the large money center banks, you know, just aren't lending when it comes to, you know, medium-sized and small-size assets. So we found ourselves being a bit more creative, smaller regional and community bank opportunities where we've sort of rolled up $30 million lines with multiple banks, as opposed to doing, you know, a large financing with a big investment bank of, you know, a couple $100 million. So a little bit more work, but, you know, that's what you have to do in this environment to get a good cost of capital. The second thing is really the acquisition market and the opportunity to do greenfield builds of assets. And again, most of our focus has been up to this point in the cell tower space. So we build towers and we also acquire towers. And you kind of have to take what the market gives you. If it's, you know, if there are opportunities to buy assets, well, that's what you do. If not, then you need to focus on building assets. Fortunately, in this difficult economic environment, there have been more sellers, people who are either, you know, running cash tight that want to get out, and that makes purchase opportunities a bit more attractive. Or, frankly, people that are concerned that tax rules are going to change, capital gains might go up, so they want to get out now before any of those changes happen. So we found that to be kind of interesting. The other thing is sort of the niche focus of our acquisitions and our builds. We're more focused on government opportunities now, where there are wireless networks that are being constructed for government purposes, whether they're federal, state, or local, where the funding just isn't there for them. So as opposed to owning their own assets and operating them, they'd be more interested in letting somebody else own them and then leasing space on those assets or capacity back. So those are sort of the three things that have been going on. So financing, you know, taking what the market gives to you, and then also the niche focus that we've developed in this sort of a market.
I think for us, because we're at the very early stages of a company, it hasn't changed, the downturn hasn't changed our investment pace in terms of we'll do 2 to 4 investments a year. That really hasn't changed with the downturn. I think 2 things have changed, though. One is with respect to financing strategy, and the other is with respect to liquidity. So on the financing strategy standpoint, I see we spend a lot more time up front thinking about how much money do we, the syndicate, put in, and what are the milestones for the company? Because we want to make sure that with the money we've got, we can create value so the next investor will come along and put in money at a higher price than we paid. So we spend a lot more time thinking about what those milestones are and making sure we've got enough capital to get us comfortably through those milestones. Second is we're much more interested in capital efficiency because, for example, a lot of these network equipment deals take $30, $40 million, and that's harder to round up that kind of capital these days than it was 10 or 15 years ago. So I think we've kind of a bias and a shift maybe towards things that are more capital efficient where you can get farther with a certain amount of money. And I think the last thing we think a lot about is that, look, the venture capital asset class has been lousy for the last 10 years. It's been a losing proposition by and large. And so what we're finding is the supply of investors is shrinking. And so there are fewer folks around. So we spend a lot more time thinking about who are our investment partners and making sure that they're stable and that they've got a long-run platform. So that's financing strategy. The second thing is with respect to liquidity. You know, the IPO market is not dried up, and it's better than it was, but it's not great. And so the ratio of companies getting bought to getting public is, I don't know, 15 to 1 or something like that. It moves around. So most companies, so we got to be thinking about how are we going to get bought, by and large. And we spend a lot more time than I would have imagined in board meetings thinking about liquidity. How do we get this company to a point where we can get liquidity? Who's going to buy it? Why are they going to buy it? How do we position the company? Do we know who the buyers are? Do we have relationships with those folks? So it's become a much bigger part of the CEO's job, I found in the last year or two, thinking about acquisition and how we get there. So I guess for you all, if you're thinking of starting a company, I would think very hard about capital efficiency and making sure you've got milestones put together to get you from point A to point B.
Joe, I have a follow-up question for you. You mentioned earlier that you're kind of an outlier on the panel, and I wanted you to speak a little bit more about TDF and the fact that TDF is really a product of the '96 Telecom Act. So you were created through a governmental effort. How does that distinguish what you do from generally your colleagues on the panel?
So TDF has an interesting history as a venture fund. As Tom pointed out, it was a byproduct of the Telecom Act of '96, where folks in the Energy and Commerce Committee were deregulating the communications world, particularly the local loop. And folks there thought, hey, as long as we're doing this, let's have an initiative for around small business development in the communications area. So they set up TDF as an entity, and the entity was financed by interest earned on spectrum auctions. So someone clever said, gee, they're doing these spectrum auctions, the money sits in non-interest bearing accounts. If we put the money from, and this is money that comes from AT&T or Verizon, whoever wants to buy spectrum, they make a down payment. And it was sitting in non-interest bearing accounts. So someone clever said, well, why don't we put them in interest bearing accounts? And that sort of creates found capital, non-appropriated dollars. And we can use that to support this initiative. And so TDF got structured with that financing mechanism. And then when TDF got set up by a board which has a mix of private and public sector folks, that board was put together to sort of look after the interests of the money, so to speak. And that board set up TDF as a venture capital structure, thinking that that's a well-understood model for getting capital to worthy entrepreneurs. So that's sort of the history of the program. It looks from the outside in, if you will, as a venture capital fund that's oriented around the telecommunications sector, but that's the history as I've learned it since I came on board a couple of years after it got started. The reason I was saying I was different from other folks is that most of these folks are investing later stage, cash flow positive businesses, so they want to see you when you're up and going and you've got revenue and you've got nice growth and all those attractive characteristics. I'm a little different than I'm interested in investing at the various earliest stages. So there's two people with a really good idea and they've got a piece of paper and we want to figure out how we get going. So I probably do, that's pretty much what I do, whereas other folks in the panel tend to do stuff that's a little bit later.
Thank you. General question for everybody, and you guys have been very disciplined in going sort of right down the line, but you can jump in when you've got an idea. So this has to do with the National Broadband Plan. As you know, the FCC issued the plan in March of this year. And the plan really focuses on broadband deployment and adoption noting that our country's lagging performance in broadband capability and user access really sort of lags behind other countries. We're at about 65% adoption when it comes to sort of households in the United States, and that's improving. But you compare that to other countries like Singapore that are well above 90, we have a long way to go. And so the plan speaks to, a number of issues, a number of initiatives and recommendations through the FCC on how to sort of deploy infrastructure, but also how to increase adoption or demand for broadband and internet services. And some of the recommendations are freeing up an additional spectrum for unlicensed use, making 500 megs of spectrum available within the next 10 years, creating incentives for universal adoption and things like that. Where do you see the best opportunity for emerging businesses, having looked at that plan, and emerging businesses and or small businesses kind of within the context of the broadband plan?
I'll take a shot at it. And again, my focus is really wireless. So as I think about wireless broadband, and as we listen to the panel that came before us, particularly, is it Gary Boger who spoke, he talked about some of the funding that would be available in some of the areas where there's less population and would be the target areas for this growth in broadband availability. To the extent that you believe that LTE and true 4G capabilities are going to get rolled out clearly in the NFL cities, and then it'll take some time to sort of expand into more rural areas, I think that's actually an opportunity for more infill players to get involved in the more rural markets if they can access the type of capital that Gary and the folks at RUS suggest that they'll make available, and SBA, et cetera. And the real challenge is for, unlike the sort of the RUS capital that was rolled out, which I've talked with folks at the FCC about, they kind of weren't involved with how that capital was allocated, but we're very much interested in how the rollout of the ultimate services came about. So the real challenge is, how do you combine the FCC's efforts with the capital that's going to be made available or could be made available by SBA or RUS to make sure that those less developed areas get funded properly by entrepreneurs that want to fill in those spots, which ultimately will get rolled up by the big carriers as population grows, more services are adopted, et cetera.
I'll address the question more from our deal flow. We have, since 2006, CENTCOM has probably reviewed about somewhere between 550 and 650 business plans. And I will shudder a guess that we might have seen one, maybe two business plans that even look at trying to play in the space. And for us, there are a number of industries that, there are a number of big opportunities that grab a lot of headlines. So in this building, the topic is grabbing a lot of headlines. On certain committees on Capitol Hill, it's grabbing a lot of headlines. But as much as I'm out in the market, I don't see a lot of entrepreneurs, particularly entrepreneurs of color, looking to play. Now, with that said, I could get flooded by business plans and proposals today, and that would be fine. But the capital that we have raised and what we talk to pension funds about, who are our primary investors, did not contemplate a comprehensive build-out of broadband centers. It may have comprehended some wireless solutions that work around it. It's certainly focused on a few additional fill-in linear ethnic channels, whether that's the Hispanic marketplace or the Asian marketplace, or maybe even an African-American channel. But the solution associated with bringing broadband to rural America, I would say very little of our capital, given the pace that we're investing it in and when this opportunity might overlap that. I can almost tell you that from CENTCOM 5, which we probably have 2 more years on the investment cycle, I doubt we'll deploy $1 against that solution. Not because we don't want to, but because it's a fair ways off for a horizon for us, like Jim, that would invest early and see a company that would lay its network, added subscribers, build the cash flows, and then sell it. So, I mean, that might be a different way of answering your question.
And I agree with what Bob is saying. I would say, though, historically, when you looked at spectrum auctions, you know, they were way too expensive for any small business to even contemplate participating in, and therefore we were not even, you know, a part of that equation. As you start to talk about unlicensed spectrum, the opportunities, I think, will be the niche plays. You know, what kind of niche strategy can you come up with that is going to be attractive enough to an investor to take a look at? And then juxtaposing that against the fact that it's unlicensed, you know, the license gives you some barrier to entry. Unlicensed takes a little bit of that away. So how do we create a differentiating prospect and opportunity that makes this company valuable? And really it's going to be the analysis of those two. That's how we would look at deploying capital in a space like this. Taking the unlicensed and then a small business plan that really goes after niche markets, whether it's ethnic niche markets or whether it's aggregating around healthcare or education or the like. That's really where I think you're going to see a lot of this utility around unlicensed spectrum.
Two ideas from an investment thesis standpoint that we've seen that have come out of the broadband plan. One is the concept of spectral efficiency. And our friends at the FCC rightly point out that there's imbalance between supply and demand of spectrum. And so the question is, how do you manage what you got more efficiently? And so we've made a few investments and have spent some time looking at this concept of spectral technologies around spectral efficiencies. How can you get more out of the existing spectrum, and how do you monetize that? Because it's not just about technology, it's you got to make money in this business that you're going to start. So that's one area that's kind of interesting. The other is what my other panelists have talked about, is this notion of rural broadband. And when I came to TDF, we started looking at sort of rural telcos early on, and you know, look, there's something attractive about a monopoly, right? But it was just a hard business to make money at. A lot of them are USF dependent, and that's fine, but it's hard to attract other sources of capital to those businesses. And separately from our fund, we've set up a foundation. We build labs, broadband labs, in underserved and unserved communities. And we've tracked the economics of that. We found that we've been able to get broadband to folks pretty inexpensively. And then in addition to that, we've built out some of these TV white spaces networks. We built some radios that handle the white spaces and build out some of those networks. And they work great. And so my thesis is that particularly with TV white space, it's going to start to make rural economics appealing, and you're going to be able to build attractive businesses. Still a thesis. I haven't really worked the details yet, but I think that's an interesting area. We've sure seen a lot of activity around rural broadband.
I've got a number of excellent questions from the audience. I'm going to combine a couple. Broderick Byers mentions that if a company is looking for 1 to 2 million and your firm's floor is 3 to 5, what's an entrepreneur to do at that point? What's your advice? A related question is, if your son or daughter is looking to start a business in 2010, you know, what would you advise initially, given that a lot of your investment thresholds are a lot higher than a lot of our small companies are looking for?
I'll start. Normally, when I do a presentation like this and we have a little bit more time, I like to use slides. And one of the slides that I use often to answer or address those questions is something called the venture capital continuum. The interesting point about the venture capital continuum is that it doesn't start with venture capital. That's not the first money in. So the continuum has 5 steps, and the 5th one tends to repeat. But the first step, and we've all heard it, is founder's capital. And founder's capital is the money that the founder, the people creating the business, put in. And we all recognize that, you know, unless you're Bill Gates or you're Steve Case or Steve Jobs or somebody like that, there may not be enough money to bring the deal home. But even in the cases of the businesses they fund, they're going to participate along the venture continuum. So the first sort of stop-off point on the answer is teach your kids to save money, because the second step involves you. The second step of the continuum is friends and family. And there's another F that I won't bring involved, but it's the notion of bringing capital to the entrepreneur that is less sensitive to return. So friends and family, so basically parents and other people that they know. And we see business plans that have been able to take care of the entire first set of milestones associated with friends and family capital. More realistically, it'll probably get you in business. It'll probably get the business plan written. It may or may not prove the concept of whatever it is you're trying to build. So the third step is really angels and seed investors. And keep in mind, we're 3 steps in, and I haven't mentioned a venture capitalist yet. There's a shrinking pool, as Jim told you before, there's a shrinking pool of venture capitalists in the country, but the first 3 steps of it, founders, friends and family, and seed investors, don't involve VCs. And all of those have a different mix in terms of the investment horizon, the return horizon, what they're trying to look for. The 4th step is venture capital, and there's a cascade of venture firms centered around Silicon Valley on the West Coast, Boston, New York, and in some cases DC on the East Coast. And then the 5th one, finally, is growth capital. So what you've hoped to achieve throughout that entire process, as Jim mentioned earlier, is you're increasingly taking in money at a higher valuation so that the company is worth more. But the notion of helping your kids and helping them think through is first helping them understand what the various stages are and not to misalign the stage, because if you have a brand new idea and you walk to a venture capital investor and they like the idea and let's assume they do the deal, you're going to own far less of that than if you were able to stage the growth of that company and apply capital in the most efficient way at the cheapest price going up the venture continuum.
I would agree. I think there's certain state and local municipalities that have funds that address smaller amounts of money. I know in the state of Maryland, we have something that's called the Maryland Small Business Financing Authority that invests as little as $25,000 and goes up and does it in equity and does it in the form of debt. So you do have, examples of that throughout your state and city, and I think you have to kind of investigate that. To Bob's point about the angel, what we're seeing a lot of, and this does again require homework, is entrepreneurs who have been successful in a particular area sometimes are willing to help young businesses out and put their own capital at risk. And with that capital, you get also the brain that comes with it, the experience that comes with that. That requires more homework. That's relationship building, which is something I think everybody on this panel would agree that that's just part of the nature of the beast when you're trying to raise money. So I think you can also begin to investigate entrepreneurs in your space that have been successful that may be looking to, start and help and promote younger businesses. Thirdly, in this marketplace, for companies, for owners that really want to sell, you're seeing a lot of seller financing. So if you're buying an existing company, there are opportunities where the seller is willing to put up capital to help you buy the business. And that really is because they want to sell the business, they create a connection with you, and that's been a way that a lot of folks with not as much upfront capital have been able to get into ownership of a business. So that's just some of the other ways of approaching getting into business.
I want to add one thing just in terms of the cost of starting a business. This is probably one of the best times really in the past 50 years it's been to be an entrepreneur because the cost to start a business today is just a lot less. I mean, you don't necessarily need to go out and acquire a lot of server farms, and also as you look at the amount of technology that's online. I mean, you can get the accounting software you need online, you can legal, just kind of across the board, you can outsource a lot of items that you normally would do here to India and China. And in addition, just because we're in the midst of a recession, you can get people a lot less expensive and get them to work a lot more for equity versus cash going out of the business. So I think that what we have a lack of today is not necessarily capital, is the lack of ideas. And so I think that what I would tell your kids to focus on would be just trying to understand what the trends are going to be for the next 10 to 15 years, both domestically and internationally, and focus on one or two of those trends. And it may not necessarily be the first idea. Typically, firms that end up selling, that end up doing very well, that the business plan you start out with is not necessarily the business plan that you end up with an IPO or a sale. So that would be my thought in terms of today's environment.
There's also one other thing I'll add. A fun exercise to do with your kids is to get a copy of the abandoned IP catalog, as well as the bankrupt assets. And there's a law firm, Sumitomo. If you look them up online, they have a wonderful database cataloged by various types of technology that you can take a look at various software code or various other intellectual property that has been acquired and that they are trustee guardians for out of bankruptcy. And you can buy this stuff. It can be purchased for cents on the dollar. So whether it was a failed online e-commerce site or a variety of other things. But an interesting exercise would be to acquire that catalog, which is a nominal cost, $50 I think they'll charge you for the catalog, and go through the catalog and see what might be of interest, and you can really start to brainstorm business plan ideas with that. The catalog is probably about the size of a medium-sized city. That much IP is out there and available right now that can be acquired. I purposely didn't spell it because I can't right now on the panel. But if you look up Sumitomo Law Firm, and I'll get a spelling for you shortly after the panel. Thanks.
It's a question about facilitators. This is a question from, and I'm challenged by this name, but I'm going to give it a shot. Madura Wijay-Wardina. The question is the Urban League, and she's with the National Urban League. The Urban League serves about 2 million people, and some of them are entrepreneurs served through the Urban League's entrepreneurial centers in 9 cities. These centers help entrepreneurs obtain funding. Do your organizations work with facilitators like the Urban League or directly with businesses only? Are there opportunities for the Urban League to work with you?
I think absolutely. There are opportunities. Most times that we deal directly with entrepreneurs and businesses, but we get our opportunities from a variety of sources. Relationships becomes the key thing. We are all a part of an association, and I think that's really where there's a good marriage. The National Association of Investment Companies and Jerry and I and Bob are all members of that, is an association of investment managers that focus in the ethnically diverse marketplace or focus in, or the funds themselves are run by women or minority fund managers. And I think that's an excellent partnership for the Urban League to have to begin to really get to a broad group of capital investors. So I would recommend partnering and talking to the NAIC as one source. Well, Marathon Club and the NAIC are together, but that would be a way to access a broad group of capital providers, and then talk about how we educate, entrepreneurs to be ready for private equity, because, not every entrepreneur is ready for private equity, but it starts an educational process as well.
Yeah, I think on the direct question about the Urban League, my firm does not have a relationship with any of the Urban League offices, and so if we got a call from the Urban League, we would give it the same consideration as if the entrepreneur called us directly. The people who refer deals to us, we actually have spent time with them, walking them through our strategy, walking them through our sweet spot for our deal investments. We've also put a lot of that information online because we realize that this is an inefficient process, but there are things that you can do to make it more efficient. In most cases, in all cases, it's actually a relationship that gets the deal done, either a relationship with some intermediary or ultimately a relationship that evolves with the entrepreneur. I probably have, I would say on average it takes us 4 to 6 months to do a deal. And that may sound longer, it may sound shorter, but there's a huge mismatch between, as you all know, the entrepreneur that believes that they're going to, be in business in, 60 to 90 days or get a capital round in 60 to 90 days. And in our mind, we're still, whether we believe in the industry and the business plan or not, we're still trying to figure out who the person is that's sitting across from us, because we know as soon as we commit capital, we're likely to be in business with you for 4 to 10 years. So the notion of 1 more month, 2 more months, 4 to 6 more months is really irrelevant, given that we're going to be in business so long together. So it's an important tip to realize. We always tell entrepreneurs, I'm affiliated with the Marathon Club, and we always tell entrepreneurs that come through that process that it's going to take twice as long and twice as much money to do whatever it is you're trying to do. And we don't have business plans, even the ones that we fund, where those milestones, those financials, even in some cases those products are what's ultimately achieved. Venture capital is the opportunity to get in and evolve. That's really what it is. We hope you can execute on your business plan, but in most cases it's not that business plan. And if we look back 3 years, it wasn't that business plan. It was that the capital gave you a legitimacy, an opportunity to be in the market and figure it out. So much of, a hockey stick projection, and it's going to break even in 2 years and then produce, $40, $50 million in cash after that. Haven't seen it, but we have seen the entrepreneur that got in, figured something out, and then really began to gain traction as a result of it.
Another question from the audience, going back to spectrum. With the ever-growing scarcity of spectrum, especially that scarcity's effect on innovation, how does that affect how you decide on whether to invest in radio or traditional TV or other types of communications ventures?
It's well, it sort of goes back to a question that I think we may have talked about before the panel began, which is, who is still investing in traditional broadcast, radio and TV, and how. So this may not be a direct answer to that question, but just sort of around that space. Where I see the opportunity personally is in the assets. So again, infrastructure. We don't buy radio stations, we don't buy TV stations, but what we do is we buy infrastructure that has radio and TV cash flow on them. So again, back to towers, towers and backhaul. So we try to develop a point of view on what portions of the broadcast space actually make sense for us and we think are sticky and have the best chance of performing very well. And my thesis is certainly the Spanish speaking broadcasters, very sticky, very strong. Christian broadcasters, the religious broadcasters, and depending on the geographic area, we're very happy to buy towers, particularly in certain geographic areas where we have that type of cash flow. The sort of straight down the middle buying radio stations and broadcasters, quite a bit harder. I think there's another opportunity which, I'm not sure if anyone has quite figured this out. With the wireless deployment of full-on video streaming applications, there's clearly not enough capacity within the traditional wireless space. However, as you take a look at TV broadcasters, which have not been performing well, and even radio broadcasters, which have not been performing well, there must be some way to take advantage of that capacity to use towards some of the future applications that we're seeing get offered. It's an engineering challenge, but it's something definitely worth spending some time focusing on. We're going to do that to try and see where the opportunity lies.
Sorry, I'll just add a little to that. I agree with David that they're interesting assets, and can you do something interesting with those assets? And so we've seen not a lot, we've seen a number of folks, we've got a little money in this notion of broadcasting content using a hybrid infrastructure. So taking excess digital TV spectrum that the broadcasters have that may not be using, licensing that, because it's a great medium for broadcasting a lot of content, and then merging that with an internet connection and sort of provided an integrated over-the-air internet connectivity into one screen, if you will. So you can, over your one screen, you can get both broadcast content, but you can also get Google and YouTube and all that into your one television. So we're seeing a lot of this merger of different broadcast mediums.
Yeah, I might add that while, again, my focus is typically hard assets, if anyone has ideas in that particular space to solve that problem, I'm all ears for that one.
And following up on that, I think Anita and Bob, you mentioned sort of both CENTCOM's and Opportunity Capital's history with traditional broadcast properties. Starting with the proposition that there has been an exodus of investment dollars from those areas. Part of it dealing with the fact that advertising revenues have flown to these new media. What do you need to see, or what are you looking for in terms of new tech or adaptations by broadcast properties that would sort of push you to be interested again in more heavily investing in those areas?
So we see the world really from a video standpoint. We often refer to it as the 4-screen opportunity. So there used to be one screen, it was television. Then there became a second screen, which was your computer screen. Increasingly, there's a third screen that you look at more than anything, which is your wireless phone or your iPad or whatever device you choose. And the fourth screen is what we are referring to as digital out of home. So that's a TV screen at a gas station. That is a video screen in a restaurant, but it's something that you don't control. And so we actually, Syncom has not done a radio deal in over 10 years. And we still get radio, we get, even, low power FM type business plans. And the fundamentals of the business, Tom, the growth opportunity just isn't there. The audience is shrinking, the advertisers are going other places, and you can still operate those businesses and you can produce cash flow, but it's almost more of a personal entrepreneur's cash flow now, or a lifestyle entrepreneur's cash flow. And for us, we're really looking at ways to get more content and more ad sales to the multiple screens that are out there, and really looking to sort of consolidate those businesses because the efficiencies, radio is a pretty efficient business right now. The growth isn't there, but the success really will come from successful operations and not from what we would see as growth additions, things of that nature.
What I would say is, for our existing portfolios, one thing that we like about traditional broadcasting, at least within our existing portfolios, is that they have a base of listeners and viewers. And so then you create other avenues and other platforms to send out that information. So instead, you start to change your whole way of looking at it. You are a provider of content. You have multiple platforms over which to present that content. But these entities have loyal listeners and viewers. So how do you keep them with you? And that's the broadcast groups that we've had who've stayed in the business have developed the digital platforms in order to take advantage of that, in order to keep their listeners involved. So it's really, ideally, you want the cash flow that then allows those groups to build out digital strategies that take a minute to become profitable, but they've got existing cash flow to work with. That's still attractive to us. Once you work through this whole valuation upside down issue, and whatever properties are left over will be properly restructured, properly capitalized, and then I think you're going to see investors come back into that space because they understand the fundamentals. Those viewers are there, and even though, we always hear that, you've got less people listening to radio, less people, you got, more competition, all of which is true, there's quite a bit of cash flow that's still resident within traditional radio and TV marketplace, and it's how they then leverage that platform is what I think is going to make that group of entities stronger down the road, and you're going to see the investment capital come back in.
Yeah, I have a slightly contrarian view on the whole radio space, not necessarily large market, but in the niche area, particularly some of the small markets, Asian/Hispanic focus, television and radio, to the extent you can find a small market, hypothetically, you take like a Hartford, that's a niche market, there's a growing Hispanic population. If you can buy a station, very cheap, and to Anita's point, have seller financing, it's not Yahoo or Google, but if you get one station that's cash flowing $300,000 to $400,000 and roll up 10 stations, all of a sudden you got something that's throwing off $3 million a year. And, I don't know how you cut it, but you don't necessarily have to sell that. That's something that can, stay in your family, that you can pass down. So I think in this environment, there are a lot of opportunities because you have a lot of the capital providers focused on the applications, kind of cutting edge technologies. A lot of the existing capital providers that are in the late stage are focused on restructuring their existing radio assets or television assets, and they don't want to look at any additional deals. So to the extent that you can find a high net worth individual or, you know, one-off institution to help buy one or two stations that are in niche markets, that could be a very unique opportunity. So.
Thank you, Jerry. I want to move to sort of talking about the meeting process, if you will, as you all meet companies, entrepreneurs that are looking for a check. They're looking for you to invest in their companies. We understand that the investment threshold can be pretty high for a lot of your investment companies, but I think a lot of the principles are going to be the same in terms of what types of things you need to see when someone comes to you. What things do you need to see in order to say, I want to make that bet on that company? And the yang in that question is what are some of the common mistakes that you see when someone is coming to your doorstep looking for financing, where you just sort of scratch your head and say, why do they continue to either miss this information or don't provide this or make this mistake, which makes you jittery about making that investment? So that's really for the entire panel.
The obvious things that we look for and that you'll hear over and over again is experience management. You know, we want a management team that has domain expertise in the area in which they're investing. One of the things that's really key to us is the industry growing? Is the market growing? How many competitors are offering the same product or service that you're offering? We don't want a lot of Me Too's. We want to understand what differentiates you from your competitors. So how will you be able to leverage that competitive advantage? It's not enough to say the market is so big. If you give me that 1%, I'll have $10, $20 million, and that's a business. That for us is not attractive, and the red flags go up because it suggests to us that you really haven't defined how you differentiate yourself and then how you create value. So we look for those things. Those are some of the key mistakes. The other key mistakes that we notice are entrepreneurs that don't understand the numbers. I can understand a team that has a strong CFO, but I expect my CEO to understand the business and understand the numbers and understand what drives the business. So it is critical that you have a good handle on your business, on your marketplace, and when you're articulating that you are, in fact, doing that with a certain ownership of the entire business and strategy, et cetera. The other part of it, I would say, is do your homework on the people that you're talking to. You know, what kind of capital do you need? Is it private equity? Is it debt? Is it some combination? Am I the right partner? Because a lot of times we have folks that come to us and it's an early stage deal, and Opportunity Capital is a growth capital fund. Well, we've got a mismatch. I'm not going to do an early stage deal. That's just not where our sweet spot is. So I think it also helps to do the homework, because fundraising is a very difficult process. And you want to at least start out by, letting people know you've done the kind of homework to understand who you're talking to and you have a targeted view. So those are some of the mistakes and suggestions I see it when people come to us.
Yeah, I'll focus on one, and that is breezing over the competition. Believing that the quick answer is always, well, no one else is doing what we're doing. No one, this is revolutionary. And that may be true, but that also may be the thing that caused us not to be interested, because no one's approaching it the way you're approaching it. So that's one. But I've found that the entrepreneurs that successfully raise capital from us can spend a lot of time talking in detail about their key competitors. They can tell you what their model is. They can tell you, their market share. They can tell you, it's even impressive when they can get into the backgrounds of the individuals. Maybe they worked with some of the individuals that are already in place. But the one thing that they all do very, very well is they tell you how they're going to win over that particular competitor. Not how they're going to win over all of their competitors, because you don't compete against all your competitors at one time. In any industry that you're playing in, you're going to compete against someone on a select basis, hopefully of your choosing. So I would say spend a lot more time talking about the competition. really face the competition. Just because you don't know the competition doesn't mean that they're not out there. And also anticipate the unforeseen. Because Google or Microsoft or whoever isn't in the space today, tell us how Google or Microsoft, if they're going to be your competitors, would come in the space and how you're going to defeat that or how you're going to protect against that. Because ultimately, it goes from the initial meetings that we have. When we have our first review and you didn't make your numbers, you're going to spend a lot of time talking to us about the competition and what they did and how they did it. So let's have that conversation in detail very, very early.
Sort of piggyback on what Anita was saying earlier, I think the one item I would focus on is make sure that the investors that you're talking to is buying, they're buying what you're selling. So if you go and you talk to Opportunity Capital and Anita tells you, she's not really interested in a radio deal, I wouldn't take her a radio deal. I mean, because first of all, you get into a point where she's communicated that to you. It could be sort of a waste of time for both of you. The best thing to do is to go to Anita and say, look, I know you're not doing any radio deals. Do you know 2 or 3 other investors that may be doing a radio deal? So I think that's important not only for you as an investor, that's important for us as well, because as Bob mentioned earlier, I mean, we just got through a very tough fundraising cycle, and some LPs don't invest in buyouts. Some LPs only want to do venture. Some LPs just want to invest in firms that are doing business in China. So as a middle market, domestic focused fund, it applies to us as well. It doesn't make sense for us to go talk to XYZ pension fund that's not investing in the U.S. So I think it's very important just to do a very strong competitive analysis of potential investors and make sure that they're buying what you're selling.
Being an entrepreneur myself and kind of understanding what it's like to be on the other side of that table, I can tell you that what Anita said first is, in my view, the most important. Start with the numbers. If the numbers are in the back of your presentation, okay, you don't know the numbers and you don't understand, your business. Start with the numbers, understand how you make money, beginning from big to small in terms of the market size and how it gets down to you and your strategy and your business, how you make money, and how I get my money back with a very nice return, and be able to articulate that. And be able to articulate that in a very short period of time, that tells both you and also everyone else that you really understand your business. Number 2, you got to have some skin in the game. If you don't have money, or a lot of money, then you got to be prepared to work for very little money, betting on the upside. Your kitchen cabinet. Who are the people that are around you that have been supporting you and trying to pull this idea together and get it to the point where you're ready to talk to someone serious about raising real money? And I think other mistakes that people make is, as opposed to focusing on the demand for whatever it is that you're trying to put together, they focus on the marketing. And that's where that competition thing comes in and how critically important understanding your competition is. If you understand how strong the demand is for your product or your service or what have you, and you understand what portion of the market that you need to grab and who else is there competing with you, it makes it a lot more compelling for anyone who's listening to you to kind of understand what's the probability that they can be successful in that space. Just a couple things.
I'm in violent agreement with other folks here in terms of, 1, do your homework on investors and make sure you've got a good fit. 2, tell me what your edge is and how do you win. I mean, give me a landscape. If here are the people in the market, here's what our angle is and how we win. So let me add just a couple of other ones that struck me. One is, you won't believe the number of times that I hear a pitch, I have no idea what they're telling me. And so you really got to, and there's a lot of them, their infrastructure and their technology oriented, so I get all that. But you need to find a way to make your story understandable and simplified in a way that people go, oh, okay, I get it. So because you live with this every day, and so you get used to it, and then there's a jargon in all of our worlds. So focus on making a story really crisp and understandable. I mean, it's the whole concept of the elevator pitch, right? So that's one thing. 2 is the whole notion of getting a warm introduction to any investor is a huge deal. I was talking earlier about how ultimately this is a long-term relationship, And so the difference between somebody calling me who I have no idea who they are, or someone calling me and said, hey, Jerry Johnson told me to talk to you, big difference. Big difference. So to the extent that you can figure out how do you get a degree of separation from the person you want to go talk to if you don't know them directly, it's worth making that investment. And then the last thing I think is worth, at least from my point of view, is tell me about the exit. Tell me about the long term. How do we get our money out of this? Who's going to buy this? Why are they going to do that? I don't expect you to be precise on this point. And there's a debate, I think, amongst in my community of don't worry about the exit, just build a great business and it'll come. I'm more in the camp of, yeah, but look, we all need to get our money back and back to our investors, so tell me what the end game is here and tell me how you're thinking about it. We probably won't be right, you know. We may think Comcast is going to buy it, maybe so, but have in mind that this is why someone's going to buy it and why they're going to do that. And so give me some sense of how this cycle completes.
I got a couple more questions that we're going to wrap up. This one is from Richard Snyder, who's an investor. Couple questions. He says, what's wrong with HD radio? Why hasn't it taken off? And if anyone has any thoughts on low-power TV. Anyone jump in on those?
I can speak to the low-power TV one. And I think it just goes back to niche markets. I think it was about 9 years ago, I made an investment in a firm called Caballero Broadcasting, which was a group of low-power Class A television stations based on kind of in Texas and also California. This group was not cash flowing, and however, they had a great market of customers that really didn't necessarily have another outlet for entertainment. We made an investment and made about 3 times our money in a period of 2 years. We sold it to MTV. Because MTV was looking to really tap into the Hispanic market. So I think on the low power television marketplace, it's just focusing on niches and really understanding when we initially made that investment, we literally drove across the state of Texas and from LA up to San Francisco with a battery powered, low powered television to understand, what other options were available for those customers in the radius of those particular of those particular stations, and if they had any competitions, and also the quality of the programming. I think that over the past 10 years, things have changed a lot. So I think you have to do a lot more diligence around, within those markets, how many folks have iPhones, how many the internet penetration within those particular areas, because I think the share of eyeball has gone down dramatically for low power television, which also has had an impact on the valuations. So.
We initially did a low power television station, and in fact, when we bought the asset, we bought it at it was a little over $1 million. It was licensed in Northern California, and the strategy was Asian programming. And we went down that path, and what we realized was, we went to the Comcast of the world and realized they had so much spectrum and they needed so much content. We ended up taking the content part and putting it on and having it carried by Comcast in California, and ultimately it's now being carried by Time Warner in New York. And so the fact of owning the low-power television station became less important to our business model. We ended up selling that part of our asset. I mean, it was great downside protection because you could always sell it. We sold it, unfortunately, at a much lower valuation, but the company continues to move forward on the strategy. So it's kind of hard to figure out, where facilities are in this whole discussion of radio, whether it's low power or even traditional. Buying these facilities used to cost a lot of money. So that's what I would say about low power. HD, I think part of the problem has to do with equipment. And just getting manufacturers to make the equipment, and that's where, when we talk to folks in our group, why it hasn't taken off. That's been one of their responses.
I'm going to ask one last, and I want to close us out a little bit early so that folks can get a bite to eat before the breakout sessions. This has to do with telemedicine. It's from Conrad Clyburn, and it's for Bob and for Jim. What do you think of leveraging non-dilutive government funding, SBIR or STIR, et cetera, to de-risk Series A investments, particularly in broadband-supported health information tech or telemedicine?
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. The main reasons we haven't done more in the telemedicine space are twofold. One, the fear of user adoption, so the doctors themselves, and then for us, you know, so many things touch telecom. We're a niche investor in telecom. So many things touch telecom. You could probably rationalize going really wide with your strategy. But when you do that, we have found that we tend to lose when we go really wide. So the notion of us funding a telemedicine strategy with our primary expertise being in providing the capital, helping find subscribers, and helping to find exit partners and advertisers, there really aren't a lot of overlays there. So that's the main reason that we haven't done them. But the models, when you look at the financial models for telemedicine businesses, they're very attractive, you know, really, really high media-like margins. But it's the notion of being able to get the doctors and the medical systems themselves to adopt them, and then also the fear that the patients will or won't like the type of service that they're getting. But the notion of being able to de-risk the Series A with government dollars, when and where that's possible, is an attractive way, because if you can de-risk the Series A and get more of those unknowns proven, I think you'll find a lot of mid and growth stage companies that'll be willing to invest in those.
I totally agree 100%. We haven't gone as far as telemedicine. What we have done is we've invested. I told you we were branching out from a telecom-centric world and kind of touching on the healthcare aspect. And so let me give you an example. We helped start a company where these folks have figured out how to make biometric measurements off your eardrum, right? And you can measure blood pressure and VO2 and heart rate and calories and all that stuff. And it enables a mobile health world, and you can put that technology on earbuds, and everybody in the planet's got earbuds, right? They're running around with that stuff. And you can sell it into the mobile health market, but also to the elderly market, the healthcare market, the military market, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, the point of this is they've done a lot of work with SBIRs and the NIH from NSA, and it's been a hugely valuable tool for them to develop high-risk technology that an investor may or may not be willing to support. And it's for the investor and for the company, you've gotten a lot of leverage out of that. So I'm a huge fan of the program.
All right. Excellent comments, all. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. That was a wealth of information. Again, I apologize. There were a number of questions I couldn't get to. But I do want to move us along. A lot of our panelists have volunteered to do breakout sessions, so I don't want them to be starving all afternoon. So I want to make sure that everybody gets a bite to eat. But again, thank you to them for joining us. A couple housekeeping details. Everybody who's got a breakout session who was interviewing, if you're starting at 1:30, please be back here in the meeting room at 1:25. Panelists as well. We're gonna escort everyone to their respective rooms. The rules for the breakout sessions are they're going 30 minutes. One of my staff members is going to be knocking on the door at the end of that 30 minutes. So that means wrap up in 5 seconds because you're going to be moving to your next and we're going to be switching out. There is quick lunch available at Capital Cafe, which is here on the premises, or there are a couple lunch spots which are very, very close by. There's a Potbelly's right near Mandarin, and there's a sandwich place on the way. But Capital Cafe is very good, and it's right here. We also have refreshments in, what room is it? It's 488, so it's like up these stairs and around the corner for anybody who wants some quick refreshments. But otherwise, we will see everyone here back at 1:25. Thank you very much.